Chapter 4188. Among the thousands of disciples of the Imperial River Tribe, most of them insisted on these two ideas. Other than that, a small number of people had various ideas. But those ideas had obvious flaws, and their reasons were not sufficient. Most people did not agree with them. As time went by, those ideas that were not accepted by the masses were gradually drowned out. And these days, more than 8,000 people of the Imperial River Tribe had been debating whether to give up the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven and escape from the boundless Heaven continent. Before the thousands of disciples could come to a conclusion, Kenshin arrived with the Nangong clan. The Imperial River Tribe had closed the entrance to the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven and activated the double defense array. But they still saw the god-slaying battleship at the array at the entrance. When the Imperial River Tribe heard the news, they were all worried and anxious like ants on a hot pan. Many Imperial River clan people panicked, running around in panic while murmuring, "We're doomed! We're doomed! We're dead! What should we do now? What should they do?" Some Imperial River Tribe members calmed down quickly after the panic. They hurried to inform their clansmen to pack their belongings and get ready to escape at any time. And those who insisted on giving up the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven and escaping from the boundless Heaven continent were the angriest. As they packed their belongings and prepared to escape, they madly complained about those who refused to escape. If those people were not so stubborn and caused the clansmen to argue for so many days without a conclusion, they would have already given up the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven and escaped. However, everything they did was in vain. There was only one entrance to the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven, and Kenshin had blocked it. Thousands of Imperial River Tribe members could not escape. They could only hope that Kenshin would show them mercy and let them go. As for the double defense array at the Grotto Heaven's entrance, no one would be stupid enough to pin their hopes on those two arrays to stop Kenshin. That would be the biggest joke in the world. As for the 8,000 clansmen joining forces to fight Kenshin to the end, that would be suicidal. For a moment, the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven was in chaos. Thousands of Imperial River Tribe members ran around, but no one could take charge of the situation. 2 older and respected deacons stepped forward and led more than 200 young disciples to the Grotto Heaven's entrance to check the situation. At the entrance of the Grotto Heaven, Ji Tianxing led Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others out of the god-slaying battleship. Ji Tianxing was not surprised to see that there was no one at the entrance of the Grotto Heaven. Even the spatial door at the entrance was closed. Nangong Buhua frowned and said in a low voice, "Cave Lord Shimi sent a message saying that no one from the Imperial River Tribe had escaped until this morning. It seems that the Imperial River Tribe is planning to hide in their Grotto Heaven and not show their faces." Nangong Nihuang looked coldly at the entrance of the Grotto Heaven and snorted. "Do they think they are safe just because they are hiding in the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven?" Since the Alliance Master had decided to expropriate this heavenly abode for the Divine Palace and the mansion, the Imperial River Tribe had no choice but to hand it over. Not to mention that Patriarch Yuhi, the Guardians, and the Elders killed many disciples of my clan during the war. We must avenge them. Nangong Nihuang hated the Imperial River Tribe, so she came here with the intention of taking revenge. Without waiting for Ji Tianxing to give the order, she volunteered and saluted. "Alliance Master, please allow me to lead the disciples of the Nangong clan to break through the entrance of the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven." Ji Tianxing looked at her and said calmly, "I believe you can do it, but most of the disciples of the Nangong clan are injured, and you have not recovered from your injuries. If I really let you break through the entrance, not only will it take a day, but it will also consume a lot of divine power. There is no need for that. Let me do it myself. It will be done in an hour at most." After that, he used the Divine Eye Mystic technique to carefully observe the spatial door and array at the entrance of the Grotto Heaven. After a short while, he found some clues and knew what to do. The defensive array at the entrance of the 9 imperial grotto heaven was a king-level superior divine array. Although the divine array was exquisite and complicated, with thousands of changes, it was not a king-level superior divine array. However, the grade of the divine array wasn't high, so it wasn't a problem for Ji Tianqing. He frowned and pondered for a few minutes before deducing a way to break through it. Then, he personally cast a spell to break the array at the entrance. Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others assisted him. Just as Ji Tianqing, Nangong Buhua, and the others were casting spells to break the array, the 2 elderly deacons of the Imperial River tribe led more than 200 disciples to the entrance of the grotto heaven. They used the array to observe the situation outside the entrance. When they saw Ji Tianqing, Nangong Buhua, and the others breaking the array, their faces turned grave, and their hearts were filled with anxiety and worry. Panic and fear spread among the crowd. Many of the young disciples seemed to have foreseen the arrival of death. In the face of Kenshin, a legendary expert, they could not even muster the will to resist. Seeing that the disciples' emotions were not normal, the 2 elderly deacons quickly comforted them and explained, "Everyone, don't panic. They have not broken through the defensive array yet. We still have time. Moreover, judging from Kenshin's appearance and aura, he does not look like he is here to kill all of us." That's right. If Kenshin wanted to settle accounts with the Imperial River tribe and kill all of our tribesmen, he would definitely have brought a large army and come here with a murderous aura. However, he only brought the Nangong tribe's experts and a few supreme gods with him. There is no army at all. This means that he is not here to kill us. He is most likely here to subdue us. Hearing the 2 elderly deacons' words, more than 200 young disciples calmed down significantly. Among these people, a portion of them were originally in favor of surrendering. If what the elderly deacon said was true, and Kenshin was here to subdue them, then it was not a big deal. They could just surrender directly. However, they could not help but worry. What if Kenshin was not here to subdue them, but to kill all of them and eliminate all of them? They could not possibly entrust their lives to the mercy of their enemy, right? At the thought of this, many of them could not help but shiver, and a chill ran down their spines. However, when they thought about it carefully, even if Kenshin was here to kill them, they did not seem to have any way to survive. If that was the case, then they could only resign themselves to fate. Time passed quietly. Before they knew it, 45 minutes had passed. At this time, Ji Tianqing had broken through the space door and defensive array at the entrance of the 9 Palace Grotto Heaven. As the dazzling divine light shone, the space door at the entrance of the Grotto Heaven opened. Swoosh! A wise and mighty figure in a white robe stepped through the space door and entered the 9 Palace Grotto Heaven. Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others followed closely behind. Even the deity-slaying battleship shrunk to about 3 feet and entered the 9 Palace Grotto Heaven through the space door. At this moment, the 2 elderly deacons and more than 200 disciples of the Imperial River tribe all focused their attention on the white-robed young man. Everyone's nerves were tense as they gripped their divine weapons tightly. Chapter 4189. The air seemed to have frozen. There was dead silence at the entrance of the Grotto Heaven. Ji Tianqing, Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others stood in the sky near the entrance. 100 miles away, 2 elderly deacons and more than 200 young disciples were holding their swords and sabers tightly, looking at the crowd with vigilance and fear. No one spoke, and the 2 sides just looked at each other in silence. The disciples of the Imperial River tribe were all holding their weapons and pointing them at Ji Tianqing and the others, ready to fight at any time. But their pale faces, frightened eyes, and trembling hands all revealed the fear in their hearts. They were afraid that Kenshin would turn all of them into dregs and powder with a wave of his hand. But no matter how scared they were, they did not dare to take the lead and attack Kenshin. Just like that, the disciples of the Imperial River tribe did not dare to make a sound. They stood rooted to the ground and did not dare to act rashly. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing looked at the crowd, walked toward them, and spoke. Although the main force of the Imperial River tribe died in the war, those who stayed in the Grotto Heaven are old, weak, sick, and disabled. But no matter what, there are more than 200 of them, right? Where are the others? Ji Tianxing strode across the sky, walking towards the crowd at a moderate pace. Although he looked calm and his tone was calm, without any murderous intent or anger, he was too famous. The aura of an expert that he naturally exuded made the disciples of the Imperial River tribe tremble with fear. Seeing him walking towards them, the 200+ people trembled and couldn't help but retreat. It was as if there was an invisible wall in the sky that was pushing them back. Seeing these people's reaction, Ji Tianxing did not say anything more. He led Nangong Buhua and the others deeper into the Grotto Heaven. Along the way, he kept looking around and sensing the aura of the divine power in the Grotto Heaven. In general, the Grotto Heaven was rich in resources and divine power. It was indeed a rare place for cultivation. The 2 old deacons and more than 200 disciples of the Imperial River tribe flew away in fright when they saw Ji Tianxing and the others. Some of the smarter disciples had already retreated to the depths of the heavenly abode to inform their clansmen. Some of the smart Alecs retreated to the sides, hoping that the Kenshin would ignore them. After Kenshin and the others left, they would find a way to escape from the 9-palace Grotto Heaven. Then, they would have a great chance of survival. However, as soon as these disciples retreated to the sides, Nangong Buhua and Nangong Nihuang's divine senses locked onto them. Wisps of imperious, sharp divine sense filled with murderous intent locked onto them, causing them to be stunned in place. Their bodies stiffened like stone statues. They didn't dare to run anymore. They turned around with difficulty and saw Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others' cold faces and sharp eyes. Therefore, they immediately understood what Nangong Buhua and the others meant. You want to take the opportunity to escape? No way. The disciples who thought themselves clever could only lower their heads and retreat into the depths of the heavenly abode obediently. Before Ji Tianxing and the others arrived at the palaces of the Imperial River tribe, a few disciples came back to inform them. The thousands of panicked Imperial River tribe members were so nervous that they almost suffocated when they learned that Kenshin had brought people into the 9-palace Grotto Heaven. However, the disciples who came back told them that Kenshin had only brought 7 divine kings in. Moreover, Kenshin looked very calm and indifferent. He didn't have any murderous intent, nor did he attack them. At present, Kenshin didn't seem to be here to eradicate them. He was most likely here to negotiate or to subdue them. After hearing this news, more than half of the Imperial River tribe members heaved a sigh of relief. They looked relieved. As long as Kenshin didn't kill them and was willing to spare their lives, they didn't mind surrendering. With this thought in mind, the crowd quickly calmed down. At this moment, a few deacons stood out and said to the clansmen, "Everyone, calm down. From the current situation, Kenshin doesn't seem to have the intention to kill all of us. Don't panic. Previously, we were divided into 2 factions, arguing over whether to escape or not. Now that things have developed to this point, we have no other choice. If we surrender and pledge our loyalty to Kenshin, we can still keep our lives. If there's anyone who isn't afraid of death and would rather sacrifice their lives to maintain their dignity and integrity, we won't stop them. No matter what, Kenshin didn't attack us directly. This means that there's still room for negotiation. I hope everyone can calm down. It's best if you can get into formation and wait here for Kenshin's arrival." That's right. We need to show our sincerity in surrendering and show the appropriate attitude. Only then will Kenshin forgive us. If everyone is still in a mess and doesn't follow the rules, I'm afraid that Kenshin will kill us all in a fit of rage. Thus, the deacons took the lead and calmed down the 8,000 clansmen. They led everyone to the plaza of the main peak. After a full 100 breaths, The 8,000 Imperial River tribe members gathered at the plaza and lined up neatly. Then, everyone waited silently in the square with an uneasy feeling. They weren't just waiting for Kenshin. They were waiting for the judgment of fate. 15 minutes later, Ji Tianxing led Nangong Buhua and the others to the depths of the 9 Imperial Caves, where the Imperial River tribe lived. There was nothing new here. It was still surrounded by mountains. Splendid palaces and magnificent mansions were built on top of more than 50 lofty mountains. Before Ji Tianxing entered the 9 Imperial Caves, he had received the relevant information and knew that there were more than 8,000 people in the 9 Imperial Caves. He had thought that the 8,000 Imperial River tribe members would be in a mess and scattered in various mountains. It would be a noisy scene. Or they would be scared out of their wit. They would pack up their belongings and scatter, hiding in various corners of the 9 Imperial Caves. Or, the 8,000 Imperial River tribe members would be motivated and set up an ambush with integrity to fight to the death with him. He had several predictions and guesses, but he didn't expect that the 8,000 Imperial River tribe members would gather at the plaza of the main peak and line up neatly. Not only him, even Nangong Buhua and Nangong Nihuang didn't expect this result. They flew over the mountains and came to the sky above the main peak. They looked down at the 8,000 Imperial River tribe members in the plaza below. Seeing the situation in the plaza and the expressions of the Imperial River tribe members, Nangong Buhua and Nangong Nihuang couldn't help but discuss. These Imperial River tribe members are very sensible. They actually gathered together to wait for the arrival of the alliance leader. Humph, a group of people with no dignity and integrity. 1,000 years ago, the Imperial River tribe was the first to submit to the Azura God Emperor. Now that the alliance leader controls the boundless heaven continent, they are repeating the scene of that time. That's right. It's the characteristic of the Imperial River tribe to be flexible. As long as they can survive, they don't care about dignity and integrity. Chapter 4190. More than 8,000 members of the Imperial River clan gathered in the square and put on a posture of sincere surrender. Although it was very surprising, it made sense when one thought about it carefully. After all, it was not the first time the Imperial River clan had done such a thing. Even though they had been despised by the ancient clans for thousands of years, the Imperial River clan did not feel ashamed and still acted as before. Although the Imperial River clan's tactful surrender reduced some trouble for Ji Tianxing, Nangong Buhua, and the others. But this still did not dispel the contempt and disdain for the Imperial River clan. Especially Nangong Nihuang, while despising and disdaining the Imperial River clan, she also felt a little regretful. This was because she had wanted to kill the Imperial River clan and avenge her clansmen who had died in the battle. But more than 8,000 members of the Imperial River clan had bowed and surrendered. Given Kenshin's character, he would definitely not kill these people who surrendered. At most, he would imprison or exile them. Nangong Nihuang would not disobey Kenshin's orders for revenge. Therefore, she could only regretfully give up on the idea of revenge. At this moment, more than 8,000 members of the Imperial River clan in the square, under the leadership of several deacons, bowed in unison to Ji Tianxing. Greetings to Lord Kenshin. May Kenshin's martial arts prosper and live as long as the heavens. More than 8,000 people saluted and shouted in unison. The rolling sound reverberated between heaven and earth, and it was somewhat deafening. However, when Ji Tianxing heard what the crowd was shouting, he frowned slightly. Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others did not hide their disdain and disdain. The Imperial River clan was a powerful clan that had been tyrannical for thousands of years. They were the real overlords. Now, these people of the Imperial River clan actually called themselves commoners? This posture was so low that they wanted to bury their heads in the ground. As for wishing Kenshin's martial arts prosper and live as long as the heavens, and so on, it was even more nauseating. Even the 20 forces of the Rebel Alliance, who worshipped and respected Kenshin, could not say such words. This showed how strong the Imperial River clan's desire to survive was. After more than 8,000 members of the Imperial River clan saluted, they respectfully lowered their heads and waited for Ji Tianxing to deal with them. They also ignored the disdainful looks of Nangong Buhua and the others, and did not feel ashamed at all. In their view, it was not shameful to bow their heads in order to survive. The deacons looked at each other and hesitated. They didn't dare to answer. Apart from them, there were 14 other deacons and elders in the Divine King realm who had secretly left the 9 imperial caves a few days ago. In addition, over 500 of our clan's disciples have also escaped in the past 10 days. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and did not say anything. However, he turned to look at Nangong Buhua and gave him a meaningful look. Nangong Buhua immediately understood that the look meant, "I'll leave those Imperial River clan members to you." Nangong Buhua hurriedly nodded to show that he understood. Nangong Nihuang saw the eye contact between the two of them and was shocked. She cast a grateful look at Ji Tianxing. She knew that Ji Tianxing was deliberately giving her a chance to take revenge, to fulfill her wishes and make up for her regrets. However, everyone was well aware of this matter. It could only be understood and not spoken of. If Ji Tianxing ordered the Nangong clan to hunt down the Imperial River clan members who had escaped, it would seem that the Kenshin was too narrow-minded and ruthless. It would be easy for people to criticize them. However, the Nangong clan would have sufficient reasons and excuses to do so. They would not be afraid of people criticizing them. At this moment, Ji Tianxing took out a jade slip and threw it in front of the deacons. Swoosh! The jade slip emitted a dazzling white light and formed a huge light screen in the air. Hundreds of golden words appeared on the light screen. There was no doubt that the words that appeared in front of everyone was the famous Kenshin's exclusive version of the Pledge of Surrender. In the past year, almost 100 territorial lords of the boundless heaven continent had publicly recited this pledge of heavenly Tao. Therefore, the terror of this pledge of surrender had already spread throughout the boundless heaven continent. Many experts and first-rate forces even knew part of the pledge of surrender's content. You should know my rules. If you want to live, recite it accordingly. Ji Tianxing looked down at the over 8,000 Imperial River clan members and said expressionlessly. Hearing this, the people of the Imperial River clan on the square were all dumbfounded. They all looked at each other in disbelief. Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others were also stunned. They did not expect Ji Tianxing to do this. In the past, only the territorial lords and the leaders of the top forces were qualified to recite the Pledge of Surrender. They did not expect that over 8,000 Imperial River clan members, who were old and weak, could also enjoy such an honor. That's right. The people of the boundless heaven continent were proud to recite the Pledge of Surrender. Over 8,000 people reciting the Pledge of Surrender together. That scene was exciting. Thinking of this, Nangong Buhua and the others also looked at the Imperial River clan members with interest. The ordinary clansmen were still in a daze. A few older deacons, who had been through storms, immediately came to their senses. No matter what they thought in their hearts, they all showed grateful and flattered expressions on their faces. They knelt on the ground respectfully and kowtowed to Ji Tianxing in fear and trepidation. Thank you, Lord Kenshin, for sparing our lives. With a few deacons taking the lead, the remaining 8,000 Imperial River clan members all knelt and kowtowed to Kenshin. Although there were a few dozen people among the 8,000 Imperial River clan members who still had some backbone and dignity, they felt humiliated. They were unwilling to kowtow to Ji Tianxing because they felt humiliated. However, they would be too conspicuous if they stood still when over 8,000 clansmen kowtowed. If the sword god were to use him as an example and kill the chicken to warn the monkey, then he would die too unjustly. Therefore, they suppressed the humiliation and kowtowed with their clansmen. Anyway, they were not the only ones who felt humiliated. Everyone felt the same. After kowtowing, the 8,000 Imperial River clan members recited the pledge of surrender in unison. Their expressions and voices were very solemn. It was only then that Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others noticed that the pledge of surrender that the Imperial River clan recited was different from the one they had recited. The pledge of surrender was shorter. It was obvious that Kenshin had set it up for the Imperial River clan. Chapter 4191. The Imperial River tribesmen quickly finished reciting the 300-word heavenly oath. At this moment, everyone lit up with divine light, and a trace of Taoist rhyme appeared above their heads. Above the sky, the 5-colored divine lightning flashed, and the sound of thunder could be heard. Obviously, the heavenly oath was in effect, and the content of the oath was witnessed and supervised by the heavens. The 8,000 tribesmen were all shocked by the supreme heavenly power, and they stood there solemnly, not daring to move. Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others also understood that Ji Tianxing set up this heavenly oath to restrain the Imperial River tribe. Even if the Imperial River tribe members recited the oath, they would not be appointed and trained by Ji Tianxing. They would be dealt with as they should. As expected. After the heavenly vision ended, Ji Tianxing said to the 8,000 tribesmen, "Seeing that you know your mistakes and are sincere in surrendering, I can spare your lives. But you must be punished for your mistakes, so as to warn the world to avoid repeating the same mistakes. I announce that all the Imperial River tribe members will be expelled from the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven and exiled to the far north icefield. Within 3,000 years, you are not allowed to leave the far north icefield, or you will be killed." The Imperial River tribe had expected that Kenshin would not let them go so easily. Even if they recited the oath, they would still be punished. But they did not expect that Kenshin would give them such a punishment. For a moment, the 8,000 tribesmen were petrified, and their expressions were extremely ugly. This punishment was not too serious for the Imperial River tribe, but it was definitely not light. Although they were not tortured or deprived of their wealth and strength, their freedom was restricted. Not only did they lose the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven, where their ancestors had lived for generations, but they were also exiled to the barren and cold far north icefield for 3,000 years. It was a nightmare for them to be exiled to the far north icefield from the picturesque and rich land of the central region to deal with all kinds of ferocious beasts and sea tribes. After all, the far north icefield was in the northernmost part of the boundless heaven continent, between the Tianbei region and the Sunset Sea region. Ferocious beasts ran rampant there, and it was filled with many evil people who were wanted by the boundless heaven continent. Often, savage members of the sea race would enter that area to burn, kill, and loot. Thinking of this, the people of the Imperial River race trembled with fear, as if they had lost their parents. However, Kenshin's orders could not be disobeyed. They had already sworn a heavenly oath. If they disobeyed orders or escaped on the way to the icy plains of the far north, Kenshin wouldn't even need to do anything. They would be punished by the heavens and turned into ashes by divine lightning. Therefore, more than 8,000 Imperial River tribe members were silent for a long time, and could only lower their heads silently, indicating that they had accepted their fate. Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others smiled when they saw the fate of the Imperial River tribe. Everyone agreed with Ji Tianxing's punishment. Ji Tianxing was kind enough to give the Imperial River clan people 6 hours to pack up their belongings and pack up. Initially, the Imperial River tribe thought that the treasury would be plundered by the Kenshin. There weren't many resources and wealth in the treasury, and most of them had been taken away by the fleeing elders and deacons. However, the remaining cultivation resources were worth more than 60 trillion, enough for more than 8,000 people to live for 1,000 years. They didn't expect that Kenshin would not take a single thing and let them take away the resources and wealth in the treasury. The people of the Imperial River tribe were secretly grateful for this. They also admired the character of the sword god. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. More than 8,000 Imperial River Tribe members packed up their belongings and left the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven on 4 divine warships with sad expressions. The entire fleet was filled with sadness, helplessness, and decadence. They calmly and quietly flew north. After the Imperial River Tribe left, Nangong Buhua summoned a few hundred Nangong tribesmen to occupy the palaces of the Imperial River Tribe and clean up the palaces. Nangong Buhua and Nangong Nihuang accompanied Ji Tianxing as they strolled in the sky. They observed and sized up the palaces within 1,000 miles. "Do you have any suggestions?" Ji Tianxing stopped and turned to look at the Nangong father and daughter. Nangong Nihuang thought for a moment and took the lead to say, "Alliance Master, the palaces of the Imperial River Tribe have not experienced the flames of war and are very well preserved. It also saves us a lot of time, manpower, and material resources in building the divine palaces. However, the Imperial River Divine Palace on the main peak can be demolished and a higher standard palace can be built according to your preferences and instructions. Other than that, I think we can keep the 58 divine palaces and 42 mansions." Nangong Buhua nodded in agreement and said, "If Alliance Master has enough time to ask us to build a bigger and more sacred divine palace, we will do our best. However, since Alliance Master wants to solve this matter as soon as possible, I think we can keep the existing palaces and mansions and only demolish the Imperial River Divine Palace to rebuild. Also, if Alliance Master has any requirements for the layout of the cave residence, we can make some changes." Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a smile, "Actually, I want to occupy the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven and build the divine palaces and cave residence here. It is more symbolic than practical. After all, after the situation in the Boundless Heaven continent stabilizes, I will leave and go to other continents to continue saving the people. Since I won't be living here and I don't have that many soldiers and guards under me, why should I build more palaces? Therefore, both of you are right. We only need to demolish the Imperial River Divine Palace and build a more sacred and majestic one. As for the other peaks, palaces, and mansions, I will tell you later where you need to modify and adjust." In fact, as early as when the Rebel Alliance was established, Nangong Buhua and Nangong Nihuang knew that Ji Tianxing would leave after the situation in the Boundless Heaven continent stabilized. After all, Ji Tianxing truly cared about the world and wanted to save the people of the 5 continents. In other words, he wanted to occupy the entire God Realm and save all the people of the God Realm. The father and daughter were already mentally prepared and knew that Ji Tianxing would leave sooner or later. But now, after hearing Ji Tianxing mention this matter, they realized that the date of Ji Tianxing's departure was very close. The father and daughter suddenly felt a little reluctant in their hearts. Especially Nangong Nihuang, the way she looked at Ji Tianxing became much gentler and more complicated. But the father and daughter were not coy people. They understood what kind of person Kenshin was, so of course, they would not pretend to persuade him to stay. Both of them nodded to show that they understood, then took out jade slips and listened to Ji Tianxing's instructions. Ji Tianxing stood high in the sky and pointed at several peaks and palaces, suggesting that they should modify and adjust them. The father and daughter listened carefully and recorded it in jade slip. 15 minutes later, Ji Tianxing finished what he needed to say. Nangong Buhua put away the jade slips, bowed to him, and left to pass down the order and carry out the modification task. With his swift and decisive character, he estimated that he would be able to complete the modification of the Divine Palace within 10 days. Chapter 4192. For the next 10 days, Ji Tianxing stayed in the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven. Under the leadership of Nangong Buhua and Nangong Nihuang, the disciples of the Nangong clan were busy remodeling and rebuilding the palace. Ji Tianxing stayed in the distorted spacetime of the 9 Heavens Tenju Tower, busy counting the spoils of war and refining the godhead fragments of the God Kings. Among the many spoils of war, the space rings of the Azura God Emperor and the Imperial Tutor were the most important. Ji Tianxing spent an entire day tidying up the 2 space rings. All kinds of rare materials, top-notch materials, gems, and treasures were piled up into mountains. Just the space rings of the Imperial Tutor and the Azura God Emperor were filled with cultivation resources and wealth, which were comparable to the spoils of war seized by the Rebel Alliance. Ji Tianxing roughly estimated that the resources in the 2 space rings were worth between 700 trillion and 800 trillion. In terms of cultivation resources and treasures, of course, it couldn't compare to the spoils of war seized by the Rebel Alliance. If the spoils of war could be piled up into 300 mountains, this batch of resources and treasures could only be piled up into 50 mountains at most. However, although this batch of resources and treasures was small in quantity, their quality and value were much higher. Ji Tianxing put these resources and treasures into his space ring and arranged them according to their categories. After that, he picked out a dozen top-notch materials. There were a total of 16 materials, all of which were of top-notch quality and priceless. There were even a few materials that only existed in legends and hadn't appeared in the world for thousands of years. Only experts like the Imperial Tutor and the Azura God Emperor had such rare materials. Ji Tianxing picked out these materials because he wanted to forge the Burial of Heaven sword and improve the quality and power of the Burial of Heaven sword. Many years ago, he had this idea. He wanted to improve the quality of the Burial of Heaven sword to the limit of the king level. Unfortunately, too many materials were needed to forge the Burial of Heaven sword, and they were too rare and precious. If he were to travel the world and travel through the major star fields to find them, it would take him at least 100 years. Therefore, this matter had been put aside until now. He didn't expect to find hundreds of precious materials in the space rings of the Imperial Tutor and the Azura God Emperor. He filtered through them and found these 16 sets of materials, which were just enough to upgrade the Burial of Heaven sword. After making up his mind and gathering materials, Ji Tianxing no longer hesitated and started forging. He summoned the 9 Heavens Cauldron, activated the formation array of the Divine Cauldron. When the Great Formation was operating normally and the temperature in the Divine Cauldron had reached a suitable standard, he took out the Heaven Burier sword and threw it into the Divine Cauldron to refine it. 3 days later, the refining materials of the Cauldron of Heaven sword refinement were Cauldron of days after. Recasting and smelting the Heaven Burier sword was very taxing on one's mind. It required Ji Tianxing to continuously cast spells. The process was not only meticulous, but it also took a long time. However, Ji Tianxing was already used to it. He focused on refining the Burial of Heaven sword day after day. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Nangong Buhua led the disciples of the Nangong clan to complete the renovation of the palaces and residences. The layout of the 58 mountains, the 108 palaces, and the residences became even more majestic, forming a heaven and earth great formation of their own. After Ji Tianxing's guidance and the Nangong clan's renovation of the palaces, not only did they look more sacred and dignified, but they also became more practical. Especially on the main peak, the dazzling Tianxing Divine Palace, which was as dazzling as the sun, was even more majestic and imposing. Ji Tianxing named the newly built Divine Palace Tianxing Divine Palace. Nangong Buhua, Nangong Nihuang, and the others did not delve into the meaning behind this name. In their opinion, Kenshin's name was Tianxing, and this palace was named Tianxing Divine Palace. It was normal for it to be related to the word Tian. In addition, the name of the 9 Defense Grotto Heaven was not changed. After these 10 days, the relevant news had long spread throughout the boundless heaven continent and was known by the common people of the world. Everyone knew that Kenshin was merciful and forgave the thousands of Imperial River Tribe members. He did not even touch the Imperial River Tribe's treasury and resources. However, in order to show his authority and punish them, Kenshin ordered the Imperial River tribe members to swear an oath and exile them to the far north ice plains. They were not allowed to return to the Boundless Heaven continent for 3,000 years. The people of the Boundless Heaven continent felt that this punishment was more reasonable. He punished the Imperial River tribe but did not exterminate them. He gave them a way out. From this, it could be seen that Kenshin was magnanimous and merciful. He was indeed a wise ruler. After Kenshin punished the Imperial River tribe, the 9 Defense Grotto Heaven naturally belonged to Kenshin. Kenshin built the Tianqing Divine Palace in the 9 Defense Grotto Heaven and set it up as a cave abode. It was the center of power that controlled the Boundless Heaven continent. After this news spread, it also caused a huge commotion among the people, causing hundreds of millions of people to talk about it. If nothing unexpected happened, it was basically certain that the sword god controlling the Boundless Heaven continent had already become an established fact. Since Kenshin had confirmed that the 9 Defense Grotto Heaven was a cave abode, the next step would be to recruit troops and build a guard army and a patrol envoy team. The former would guard the 9 Defense Grotto Heaven and maintain its safety and authority. The latter would patrol the Boundless Heaven continent and supervise the 100 territories. However, everyone knew that Kenshin's forces were the various ancient clans and sections. Those were the top nobles and overlords. Naturally, they could not be stationed in the 9 Defense Grotto Heaven to be Kenshin's guards, nor could they be patrol envoys. As a result, Kenshin could only recruit ambitious people from the people and bring them under his command. Many Divine Lord Realm experts and Divine King Realm powerhouses all saw the hope of a meteoric rise. As a result, those clever experts and experts on the Boundless Heaven continent took the initiative to seek refuge without waiting for Kenshin to issue an edict to the world. On the other hand, several ancient forces of the Rebel Alliance were still tracking down and intercepting the remaining forces of the Imperial Tutor and the Azura God Emperor. Nangong Nihuang had also led several elders, deacons, and many divine kings in her clan to personally search for and intercept those elders and deacons of the Imperial River tribe who had fled in advance. With Ji Tianqing's approval, the Shimi Grotto Heaven secretly merged with the intelligence forces under the Imperial Tutor and took over the intelligence network that covered the entire continent. In short, Ji Tianqing had the overall situation under control. The chaotic and uneasy Boundless Heaven continent gradually regained its calm. Of course, the calm was only on the surface. There were still some undercurrents behind the scenes. However, under such a big situation, those small and scattered undercurrents could not raise any waves. As time passed, the remaining forces of the Imperial Tutor and the Azura God Emperor were destined to be wiped out. Kenshin's ruling power and control of the Boundless Heaven continent would also be strengthened layer by layer. Chapter 4193. 10 days had passed in the outside world, and Ji Tianqing had already been in the distorted space-time for more than a year. He first spent half a year casting spells to refine the Sword of Burial of Heaven, successfully forging it into a top-grade king-level divine sword. Moreover, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was already the best of the best. Its quality and power had reached the peak of the king level. If it went one step further, it would surpass the shackles and become an emperor-level divine weapon. Of course, that was if there was an emperor-level divine weapon. After forging the Sword of Burial of Heaven, in the remaining months, Ji Tianqing began to circulate his energy to refine the godhead fragments of the Imperial Tutor and the many God-King level powerhouses. The Imperial Tutor's godhead fragments were naturally of the utmost importance. Not only was the Imperial Tutor a peak God-King, but he had mastered more divine Tao laws. More importantly, the Imperial Tutor was the Azura God Emperor's #1 confidant, and he definitely knew many secrets. As expected, Ji Tianqing spent a month's time to completely refine the Imperial Tutor's godhead fragments and plunder the Imperial Tutor's divine soul memories. Through the Imperial Tutor's divine soul memories, he indeed knew many of the Azura God Emperor's secrets. For example, when the Azura God Emperor left the God realm, how many elite forces did he take with him? How many God King level powerhouses were there, what realm they were at, how many upper divine lords were there, how many people were there, and how many cultivation resources the boundless heaven continent sent to the Azura God Emperor every 50 years, and so on. In this way, Ji Tianxing had a very detailed understanding of the number of powerhouses and military strength under the Azura God Emperor's command. Of course, he only used this number as a basis to make a judgment of the Azura God Emperor's military strength. He was well aware that the Azura God Emperor not only took away a lot of military strength from the boundless heaven continent, but also gathered many powerhouses and experts in outer space. Even though he had already destroyed the Azura God Emperor's strengthened incarnation. However, he was well aware that he was still no match for the Shura God Emperor. The Shura God Emperor's power was still as strong as ever. In the future, when he entered the outer space and battled with the Azura God Emperor, he would need to be more careful and cautious. In addition, Ji Tianxing also learned about the forces that secretly sided with the Imperial Tutor and the Azura God Emperor. Although the Shimi Grotto Heaven had been investigating this matter, they had indeed found several factions. However, there were still a few fish that escaped the net and hid themselves well enough that Ji Tianxing got the answer from the memories of the Imperial Tutor's soul. Ji Tianxing already knew the details of those forces. He planned to sort out this information and hand it over to the various forces of the Rebel Alliance, so that they could eliminate the fish that had escaped the net. Among the many secrets, Ji Tianxing obtained the most important and also the most confidential information. According to the Imperial Tutor's knowledge, the Azura God Emperor and the other 4 God Emperors were doing their best to research the mystery of the Grey Fog at all costs because the 5 God Emperors could sense the rich power of the heavenly Tao from the mystery of the Grey Fog, as well as an extremely terrifying aura of power. They firmly believed that in this vast void, even if there were 9 galaxies and billions of stars, they were all ordinary matters. Only the mystery of the Grey Fog, which contains supreme mysteries and power, seemed to let them see the location of the heavenly Tao. The 5 God Emperors all had a premonition that if they opened the mystery of the Grey Fog, they would be able to uncover the world's greatest secret and see the so-called heavenly Tao. In fact, if they could crack and control the mystery of the Grey Fog, they could even become immortal and control the heavenly Tao. Compared to immortality and control of the heavenly Tao, the continents of the God realm and the various galaxies were not even worth mentioning. However, the mystery of the Grey Fog was simply too mysterious and powerful. Even after spending 1,000 years of effort, the 5 God Emperors still could not pry into its secrets. They had brought many God Kings and God Lords with them to research and explore the mystery of the Grey Fog day and night, so it was only natural that they consumed vast amounts of cultivation resources. This was why the 5 God Emperors were so greedy and unrestrained in their plundering of cultivation resources. Before this, Ji Tianxing had wondered many times why the 5 God Emperors were researching the mystery of the Grey Fog at all costs. Just what was that mysterious sphere shrouded in the Grey Fog? If it could attract the attention of the 5 God Emperors and make them neglect food and sleep to research it, it had to be the world's greatest treasure. It might even be related to the heavenly Tao, some mysterious power that had something to do with the God Emperor realm. Now, the memories of the Imperial Tutor's divine soul proved that Ji Tianxing's guess was not completely correct, but it was in the right direction. Now that he had a rough idea of what was going on, he also had a corresponding conjecture and judgment regarding the 5 great God Emperors' goals and plans. After refining the Imperial Tutor's Godhead shard, he proceeded to refine the Godhead shards of the other God Kings. He had already learned many secrets from the Imperial Tutor. Thus, even if the other God Kings knew some secrets, it would not be too important. Thus, Ji Tianxing did not waste any time in plundering the divine soul memories of those God Kings. He refined another 20-some Godhead shards one after another, and only when the time was up did he end his cultivation session. He had benefited greatly from this session of seclusion. Not only had the burial of heaven reached the peak of the king level, but he had also learned many secrets of the Azura God Emperor. In addition, his energy had been strengthened, and his fighting strength was now more than 30 times that of an ordinary peak god king. The number of divine Tao laws he had grasped had reached 1,450. After Ji Tianxing came out of seclusion, Nangong Buhua hurriedly came to see him and reported on various aspects of the situation. First, the cave residence's renovation had been completed, and he requested Ji Tianxing to inspect and correct it. Second, the situation on the boundless heaven continent had stabilized, and the various forces under the rebel alliance had completed their task. Third, in accordance with Ji Tianxing's orders, Shimi Cave Heaven had commanded the intelligence forces to inquire about the situation outside the boundless heaven continent as early as a month ago. Now, the results of Shimi Cave Heaven's investigation were out. Just as Ji Tianxing had expected, the news of the rebel alliance launching a crusade against the Azura God Emperor, as well as their successive victories and seizing cities and territories, had long spread across the boundless heaven continent. Now, related news had spread across the Reincarnation Island, the Qiankuan continent, and the Firmament continent. The people of those continents were very shocked by this news, and at the same time, they were also faintly looking forward to it. As for the fourth matter, Nangong Buhua asked Ji Tianxing if they should hold a ceremony to announce it to the world. Ji Tianxing had also considered this matter. Although there was no practical significance in holding a grand ceremony. However, the symbolic meaning was very important. After all, he had ended the reign of the Azura God Emperor and become the new overlord of the boundless heaven continent. If he did not gather the 20 forces under him and the masters of hundreds of regions to hold a grand and solemn ceremony, it would be too informal. One had to know that he was now truly respected, supported, and loved by hundreds of millions of people. In the eyes of the people of the boundless heaven continent, he was the embodiment of justice and the heavenly Tao. No matter what, this ceremony had to be held, and it could not be small. Chapter 4194. If the ceremony was not held, Ji Tianxing could stay for another month or so until the situation was completely stabilized, and then he could leave the boundless heaven continent. But if the ceremony was held, he would not be able to leave within 2 months. After all, the leaders of the 20 forces of the rebel alliance, as well as hundreds of domain masters, had to be present. The preparations for the ceremony would also take a long time. Ji Tianxing estimated that 2 months would be very fast. He agreed to hold the ceremony and named it the Boundless Heaven Universal Ceremony. It not only represented the change of ownership of the boundless heaven continent and his succession to the position of overlord, but also meant that hundreds of millions of people had regained their freedom and that the whole world would celebrate. The Boundless Heaven Universal Ceremony would still be hosted by the Nangong clan, and all the forces would cooperate. As for Ji Tianxing himself, he would still be a hands-off boss, and only needed to command and make decisions. Nangong Buhua did not feel that it was tiring or busy. Instead, he happily acknowledged the order and went to draft the preliminary regulations. He was well aware that as the vice leader of the anti-rebellious alliance, he had to do everything himself. After all, after the Boundless Heaven Universal Ceremony ended and the situation on the continent stabilized, Ji Tianxing would leave to rescue the other continents. At that time, all the affairs of the Boundless Heaven continent would be managed and handled by him. If he could not even handle such a small matter, he would find it troublesome and busy. Then how could Ji Tianxing rest assured that he would be in charge of the entire Boundless Heaven continent? He had to show enough ability to be qualified for the position of deputy chief, so that Ji Tianxing would be assured and the other 19 forces would be convinced. Nangong Buhua was very efficient. After just half a day, he brought the newly drafted regulations to Ji Tianxing for a look. The two discussed in the study for 2 hours, and Ji Tianxing made some changes and additions to the regulations he had drafted. Some of the matters that Nangong Buhua did not consider thoroughly were further improved by Ji Tianxing. In this way, the two finalized the specific rules of Haotian's ecumenical ceremony, and Nangong Buhua began to carry out his task. He first used the name of Ji Tianxing to send a message to the 19 forces under the Rebel Alliance and over 100 domain masters to inform them of the time of the ceremony. Then, he mobilized more than 1,000 people of the Nangong clan and rushed to the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven to carry out the mission. He was going to lead 2,000 disciples to set up the venue of the ceremony in advance and do the preparatory work. The venue was near the entrance of the 9 Guards Cave Heaven, but it was not between the mountains and the earth, but above the vast sea of clouds. When the time came, the huge venue would not only have to accommodate the disciples of the 20 forces, but also nearly 100 region masters and their entourage. It would also have to accommodate millions of commoners. The venue above the sea of clouds had a radius of at least 1,000 miles. It was completely formed by cloud platforms and supported by a great formation. If he wanted to make the venue appear sacred and dignified, he would have to spend a lot of time and effort to set up many complicated formations and decorate it with many materials. It would take at least a month for the 2,000 disciples of the Nangong clan to do all these complicated and trivial things. In addition, the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven also needed a large number of guards, both to guard the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven and to show the prestige of the Kenshin. The requirements for the guards were higher. They had to be at least an upper-level divine lord. The captain of the guards and the governor had to be at least a divine king. Most importantly, they had to recruit at least 5,000 guards to not look shabby. Even the 20 forces under the command of the Anti-Rebels Alliance would not be able to gather so many elite guards in such a short time. This was a difficult task. Fortunately, Nangong Buhua requested Ji Tianxing to announce to the world that they could openly recruit guards and form an army. Ji Tianxing, of course, nodded in agreement. He did not have to do the selection and assessment of the guards. He would leave it to Nangong Buhua. Nangong Buhua felt a little pressured, but he still accepted the task and promised to complete it on time. He had thought that it would be difficult to complete this task, but he did not expect that 2 days after Kenshin's decree, many divine lords and divine kings would come to the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven to participate in the assessment. After asking around, Nangong Buhua found out that the divine lords and divine kings from all over the world had already arrived near the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven. They had already thought of this half a month ago, so they had made preparations in advance. Nangong Buhua was relieved. He felt gratified and secretly relieved. The so-called assessment was very simple. There was no need to compete in an arena. It was mainly to test the divine lords and divine kings' strength, divine powers, and dharma spells to find out their background, and conduct. Those who met the requirements would be selected based on merit, and those who did not would be eliminated. The divine lords and divine kings who were selected would have to swear a heavenly Tao oath that Ji Tianxing had specially made to pass the assessment. The heavenly Tao oath was very strict and solemn, but it was not excessive. The purpose of the oath was, of course, to ensure the loyalty of the guards and to restrain their conduct. The heavenly Tao oath that Ji Tianxing had made was widely known in the boundless heaven continent, and everyone knew about it. Therefore, the divine lords and divine kings who came to participate in the assessment were already mentally prepared. If they wanted to be loyal to Kenshin and become guards of the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven, they had to swear loyalty. This was understandable. Therefore, the assessment went very smoothly. In just 10 days, more than 1,000 immortal emperors and more than 30 immortal kings passed Nangong Buhua's test and became guards of the 9 Defense Grotto Heaven. This greatly reduced the pressure on Nangong Buhua, and he was confident that he could complete the task ahead of time. The 1,000 guards who passed the assessment thought that it would be very difficult, but they did not expect to achieve their wish so smoothly. They were also very glad that they were quick-witted. In the following days, many masters and experts from all over the world came to the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven to sign up for the assessment. After 1.5 months, more than 6,000 people passed the assessment and became guards of the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven. Among them, 6 high-level divine kings were commanders, 60 middle-level and low-level divine kings were guard captains, and the ordinary guards were all high-level divine lords. Therefore, the guard corps of the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven was officially established. Zhan Wushuang of the War God clan and Lan Ji of the Lan clan were respectively the Grand Governor and Vice Governor of the Guard Corps. Zhan Wushuang was the younger brother of the Ares clan leader, and also the 4th elder of the Ares clan. In the past year of war, his performance was very outstanding, and Ji Tianxing appreciated his efficiency and ability in carrying out the task. Lan Ji and Zhan Wushuang had similar backgrounds, and they were both elders of the Lan clan. They were both brave and loyal, and their ability was outstanding. Ji Tianxing appointed them to lead the Guard Corps because he trusted the Ares clan and the Lan clan. When the Guard Corps was established, the clan leaders, and elders of the 19 forces also arrived. Nearly 100 territorial masters also arrived at the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven one after another. With more manpower, the layout and preparation of the venue were quickly completed. 8 days before the ceremony began, everything was ready. Chapter 4195. The preparations for Haotian's universal ceremony were completed. The 6,000 guards of the newly built Guard Corps were also training day and night to achieve a higher level of cooperation and tacit understanding in the shortest time possible. There were also various trivial matters that were being further handled and resolved. Ji Tianxing did not need to worry about any of this. Nangong Buhua, the deputy alliance leader, would command the various forces and territorial masters to work together to resolve it. In addition, the news of the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven's universal ceremony had spread throughout the boundless heaven continent a month ago. Billions of people were excited when they heard the news. They cheered, celebrated, and discussed animatedly. Those who were closer to the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven all set off to attend the ceremony in person. Those who were too far away from the 9 Imperial Grotto Heaven could not attend the ceremony, so they went to various empires and cities to worship the statues of Kenshin. Many divine kingdoms were also planning and preparing to hold a grand celebration and worship ceremony on the day of Haotian's universal ceremony to express their respect and wishes for Kenshin. Haotian's universal grand ceremony had become the grandest ceremony in the Haotian continent in the past 1,200 years, causing all the people to rejoice. The 2-month deadline was up. Ji Tianxing ended his closed-door training the day before Haotian's universal ceremony. 2 months had passed in the outside world, but he had cultivated in the distorted space-time for 8 years. In these 8 years, he had refined all the 200 pieces of divine persona fragments that he had accumulated. After refining those divine persona fragments, he consumed a huge amount of resources to perfect and cultivate the 6th level of the Heaven Punishment divine technique. He had deduced the 6th level of the technique to the extreme and reached a perfect level. Even so, the 6th level of the divine technique could only allow him to reach the limit of the divine king realm, but could not surpass it. He could only follow his previous train of thought and improve his strength from all aspects. He improved little by little and explored his own limit. On the other hand, the heaven-patching pearl and the 5 elements world had been devouring the star fragments and crystals, as well as many cultivation resources. Ji Tianxing had not finished devouring the star crystals that he had obtained in the extraterritorial starry sky. However, the heaven-patching pearl's power had recovered, and the 5 elements world had been growing stronger, increasing his strength. When he ended his closed seclusion cultivation, his strength already reached 40 times that of ordinary peak divine kings. The number of divine Tao laws he'd grasped had also reached as many as 1,500. In other words, he'd already grasped half of the 3,000 grand Taos that had circulated in the world since the heavens and the earth were split apart. How inconceivable was this? Ji Tianxing couldn't help but guess that probably only the 5 great god emperors were capable of grasping so many divine Tao laws, right? Ordinary peak divine kings did not even dare to think about it. The next day, Haotian's universal ceremony was held as scheduled. Outside the 9 defense caves, under the blue sky, in the white sea of clouds. The cloud platform, which had a radius of 1,000 miles, was beautifully decorated. It was like a fairyland in the heavens, like a dream. On the cloud platform, there were all kinds of decorations and exquisite buildings, pleasing the people who came to watch the ceremony. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that all kinds of exquisite sculptures, buildings, and decorations made of white clouds were the work of master craftsmen. Not only was it perfect for viewing, but it was also very practical. The entire cloud platform looked illusory and ethereal, but it actually formed a powerful divine array, which had super strong defense and power. More than 100 people and people from all over the world scattered around the cloud platform to watch the ceremony. They watched the ceremony with pious hearts, excitement, and respect. It was their greatest honor and pride to be able to witness Kenshin's elegance with their own eyes. The guards of the 9 defense caves had already been distributed around the cloud platform, wearing armor and holding swords, looking solemn and dignified. But the people were emotional, but orderly, and there were no disturbances. Nearly 1,000 first-rate forces from all over the world, and more than 1,000 emperors of the divine kingdoms, also came to watch the ceremony. They presented generous gifts to the 9 defense caves in order to express their respect and congratulations to Kenshin. 100 domain masters, escorted by the personal guards, also presented their gifts and congratulated Ji Tianxing. As for the 20 forces under the Rebel Alliance, they also presented gifts and congratulations to Ji Tianxing at this grand ceremony. Ji Tianxing sat on the magnificent and sacred throne, accepting the worship of thousands of people and the congratulations of more than 1,000 forces. Nangong Buhua, the deputy leader of the alliance, and the governor of the guards stood behind him. Nangong Nihuang and the elders of the various forces stood on both sides of the platform like guards, waiting for orders at any time. In this way, even if it was boring for Ji Tianxing to sit there, it would not be too tiring. Accepting and registering the gifts from the various forces would naturally be done by his subordinate. He only needed to sit on the throne. After the gifts were presented, more than half a day had passed. Next, Ji Tianxing followed the established rules and gave a speech of thanks and encouragement to the 20 forces, 100 territorial masters, more than 1,000 forces, and emperors. In short, he only needed to go through the motions according to the rules. After he finished his speech, he left the cloud platform, surrounded by the crowd and worshipped by tens of thousands of people. Only the leaders of the 20 forces and 100 territorial masters were qualified to enter the 9 defense caves to see him in person. The remaining 1 million people stayed on the magnificent cloud platform and began to sing and dance in celebration of the grand banquet. After returning to the 9 defense caves and entering the study of the Tianxing Divine Palace, Ji Tianxing finally relaxed. Everyone else had a mission, and only Nangong Nihuang accompanied him into the study. Looking at the twilight outside the window, he chuckled and said, "Although it's just a ceremony, sitting on the throne for a day and receiving gifts and worship from various forces is also a boring and tiring thing. Speaking of which, it's even more tiring than a big battle." Nangong Nihuang personally brewed tea for him, brought pastries and divine fruits, and comforted him. "No matter what, this ceremony must be held. It's just that you'll have to work hard for a day. You can rest for an hour first, and when the 100 territorial masters have all arrived, you can go to the conference hall after today. the overall situation of the boundless heaven continent will be settled. You can leave all kinds of complicated and trivial matters to my father and us to deal with. Ji Tianqing thanked her, picked up the teacup, and slowly tasted it. He smiled and said, "I'm just sitting on the throne, nodding and saying a few words. It's not really tiring. The real tiring ones are you, your father, and so many soldiers. For today's ceremony, everyone has been busy for more than a month. Go back and tell your father that today's ceremony can be held smoothly without any mistakes, and it's all thanks to everyone's efforts. All the soldiers who participated in this ceremony will be given appropriate rewards." Nangong Nihuang nodded and said yes. After hesitating for a moment, she summoned the courage to ask, "Alliance Master, after the ceremony, will you be leaving?" Chapter 4196. It was obvious that Nangong Nihuang did not ask this question on the spur of the moment. This question had been hidden in her heart for a long time, and it was only today that she mustered up the courage to ask. The study was very quiet, and only she and Ji Tianqing were in the room. Her expression, eyes, and tone all contained an indescribable and inexplicable meaning. Any normal man would be able to feel her meaning and thoughts. But Ji Tianqing's expression did not change, and his eyes were still clear. He slowly drank his tea and nodded naturally. Yes, the boundless heaven continent has been saved, but the people of the other 4 continents are still in deep trouble. And the news has already spread, and the people of those continents are all eagerly waiting. The powerhouses and domain masters guarding those continents will definitely make corresponding preparations and reactions. The longer I delay, the more prepared they will be, and things will be more troublesome in the future. Seeing Ji Tianqing's calm expression and serious tone analyzing the situation, Nangong Nihuang sighed silently in her heart. He was obviously worried and concerned about these things at all times. It was not that Ji Tianqing did not understand the situation, or that there was anything wrong with him. On the contrary, the more serious he was and the more he cared about the people of the world, the more Nangong Nihuang admired him. But this also proved that Ji Tianqing did not have any other thoughts about her. In Ji Tianqing's heart, she could not be compared to the general trend of the world and the hundreds of millions of people. This made Nangong Nihuang a little disappointed, and she also felt a little bitter in her heart. But she would not give up easily, and she had already thought of a response. She mustered up her courage and said, "Alliance Master has the world in mind and is determined to save all the people of the heavenly realm and return freedom to the world." Nihuang really admires such breadth of mind and courage. The situation of the boundless heaven continent has been settled. With my father, the patriarchs of the various clans, and many domain masters, there should not be any problems. But Alliance Master, if you go to the other continents alone, and the other party is prepared, it will be very difficult for you to start an uprising. Nihuang is willing to follow Alliance Master to conquer the world. I can serve you by your side, and I am also willing to lead troops into battle, kill the enemy, and share your worries. I hope Alliance Master can fulfill my wish." The meaning of these words was very clear. There was nothing left to do in the boundless heaven continent, so Nangong Nihuang wanted to follow Ji Tianqing. Regardless of whether it was to serve him or to lead troops into battle, as long as they could follow Ji Tianqing, it would be fine. To put it bluntly, she was willing to hand herself over to Ji Tianqing for him to arrange and dispatch as he pleased. As a dignified, elegant, and somewhat reserved woman, it took a lot of courage for Nangong Nihuang to say such words. Before this, she had hesitated and struggled for more than a month before making up her mind. At this moment, after she finished speaking, she felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. She was so nervous that she even forgot to breathe. She held her breath and stared at Ji Tianqing, waiting for Ji Tianqing's reply. However, Ji Tianqing did not look at her expression and reaction. Instead, he got up and walked to the window. With his hands behind his back, he looked out the window with a complicated expression. With his back to Nangong Nihuang, he said in a calm and slightly low tone, "Miss Nangong, you and I have only known each other for a short time, and we have only met a few times. Why do you trust me so much? So much so that you have to leave your family and friends and travel to other continents?" Hearing him say this, Nangong Nihuang was about to express her feelings. However, Ji Tianxing didn't wait for her to speak and continued, "I've said before that I'm not alone. You've also seen it in the previous battle. Not only did my family follow me, but some friends also followed me. As for the other 4 continents, I also have some old friends and subordinate. Naturally, I will not fight alone. Therefore, you should stay to assist your father and help him manage the boundless heaven continent. To be able to maintain the peace and stability of the boundless heaven continent is also to share my worries, understand?" The meaning he expressed was still considered tactful. In fact, he was reminding Nangong Nihuang that he already had a family, and his wife and children were by his side. He could not accept Nangong Nihuang's admiration and pursuit, and he hoped that Nangong Nihuang would back off. Nangong Nihuang naturally understood what he meant, and the scene of the decisive battle a few months ago appeared in her mind. At that time, she had paid attention to Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wuhan, and Ji Wushuang. She knew that they were Ji Tianxing's wife and children. While she was amazed by Yun Yao and Ji Ku's charm, she was also very envious. Of course, the two sides did not have much contact. She admired and envied Yun Yao and Ji Ku, but it was not to the extent that she felt ashamed of her inferiority. After all, she was also a peerless beauty in the boundless heaven continent. After being tactfully rejected by Ji Tianxing, Nangong Nihuang was a little disappointed and dejected, but she did not show any resentment or dissatisfaction, nor did she dispel the idea of following Ji Tianxing. She revealed a gentle smile and said to Ji Tianxing, "Alliance Master, I know that we have known each other and worked together for too short a time, and we have not experienced trials and hardships yet. Therefore, I know what to do and will not let you be troubled by this. However, you want to conquer the divine realm and eradicate the forces of the 5 god emperors. This is a difficult task. Even if you have family and friends by your side, there is strength in numbers. We all want to contribute to you. In addition to me, Nangong Ao also insists on following you to conquer the world. As far as I know, Zhan Wudi of the War God clan, Lan Kai of the Lan clan, and Yuchi Po of the Yuchi clan have all publicly expressed that they want to follow you and leave the boundless heaven continent. If Nangong Nihuang's request to follow before was because of love, then, at this moment when she made this request, it was because she had put aside her love and only cared about passion and righteousness. This made Ji Tianxing feel a little surprised. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Nangong Ao has made great contributions, and there are also Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, and Yuchi Po. They are all people with great power, and their performance in the previous decisive battle was very outstanding. Now that the situation in the boundless heaven continent has stabilized, they can stay and enjoy glory, splendor, wealth, and have greater power and status. Why do they want to give up fame and fortune and follow me to conquer the divine realm and risk their lives? Do you know who the next enemy I will face after conquering the divine realm and saving the various continents is?" At this point, Ji Tianxing turned around and looked straight at Nangong Nihuang. Nangong Nihuang did not retreat at all. She looked at him firmly and said in a sonorous tone, "The 5 god emperors. Because everything you've done is for the sake of taking revenge on them." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and asked in a serious tone, "Since you know, then you should understand that with my current strength, I don't have much of a chance of winning against the 5 god emperors. If we really fight to the death, I will very likely be reduced to ashes and fall again. If you follow me, you can only be buried with me. Are you not afraid of death?" Chapter 4197. This time, Ji Tianxing's words were very direct and not tactful. He wanted Nangong Nihuang to understand how dangerous it was to follow him to battle the God realm and deal with the 5 God emperors. He knew in his heart that with his reputation and prestige in the God realm, as long as he raised his arm and called for help, there would definitely be a swarm of followers. However, those who could follow by his side could not be ordinary people. They had to be loyal and trustworthy. Therefore, he would not easily agree or accept anyone as his follower. As for Nangong Nihuang, Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, Yu Chi-po, and the others, he still hoped that they would retreat in the face of difficulties. However, Nangong Nihuang had already made up her mind and was determined to follow him. Alliance Master, we all know what you said, and we have already thought it through. However, we are not afraid of death. To be able to follow the famous Kenshin and fight the 5 most powerful God Emperors in the world, even if we die in the void, we will have no regret. In this world, some people covet power, some people covet fame and fortune, and even more people are greedy for life and afraid of death. However, we do not want to live an ordinary and mediocre life. We only want to have a beautiful and brilliant experience so that our lives can bloom with dazzling brilliance. Even if our lives will be very short. When Nangong Nihuang said these words, her expression was solemn as she stared at Ji Tianxing, her eyes shining brightly. Ji Tianxing could see that these were all words from the bottom of her heart, and there was not the slightest bit of falsehood. To be honest, he was somewhat touched. At this moment, Nangong Nihuang saw that he was silent, so she turned and opened the door of the study. "Come in. Tell the Alliance Master personally." She said these words to the several God Kings outside the study. Ji Tianxing turned and saw several young God Kings of different appearances step into the study one after another. These young God Kings were the people that Nangong Nihuang had mentioned just now. Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, and Yu Chi-po. Obviously, when Nangong Nihuang and Ji Tianxing were discussing in the study, these 4 young God Kings were waiting outside the study for the result. The 5 of them had already discussed this and chose Nangong Nihuang to express their wishes. It had to be said that this method was indeed effective. "Greetings, Alliance Master." The 4 young God Kings stood in a row in the study room and bowed to Ji Tianxing. Then, without waiting for Ji Tianxing to say anything, they said in unison, "Lord Alliance Leader, please allow us to follow you to conquer the celestial realm and fulfill our dreams." Nangong Nihuang had already explained their reasons and thoughts, so there was no need to elaborate. Ji Tianxing was a little surprised that they called it their dream. Seeing their similarly bright eyes and the same determined attitude as Nangong Nihuang, Ji Tianxing was a little hesitant. Originally, he wanted to reject them, but after thinking about it, he decided to give them a chance. "I hope that all of you have seriously considered this matter and not made this decision on the spur of the moment. All of you must think carefully. Follow me and leave the boundless heaven continent to conquer the divine realm and challenge the 5 God Emperors. This means that all of you will give up glory, wealth, and stability and risk your lives." As soon as Ji Tianxing finished speaking, Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, and the other 3 quickly nodded and replied firmly, "Please rest assured, Alliance Master. We have thought it through carefully." Since these 4 guys were so determined and swore to follow him and would rather die than retreat, what else could Ji Tianxing say? After staring at them for a while, he could only nod in agreement. "I have said what needs to be said. Since all of you are so determined, I will fulfill your wishes. All of you may leave. Go and make preparations to say goodbye to your friends and relatives. In about 10 days, I will send a message to inform you." Seeing that Ji Tianxing had finally agreed, the matter was settled. The 4 young God Kings were full of joy and quickly bowed to thank him. Then, Nangong Nihuang and the 4 young God Kings left the study room together. After they walked out of the study room, Nangong Ao and the others looked at Nangong Nihuang with concern. They wanted to know if there was a result of her discussion with Kenshin. Nangong Ao knew the inside story and even cast an inquiring look at Nangong Nihuang, asking her if Kenshin had agreed. Nangong Nihuang pretended not to see everyone's expressions and eyes and said calmly, "Everyone, our dreams will be realized soon. Next, we have 10 days to prepare and say goodbye to our friends and relatives. Everyone, don't waste time. After all, this should be the first time we leave the boundless heaven continent and go to other continents." After saying that, she waved goodbye to Nangong Ao and the others and quickly left. Even though she pretended as if nothing had happened, Nangong Ao and the others knew that she and Kenshin had talked alone for so long in the study room and must have expressed their feelings. Since she did not mention this matter and her eyes and back looked a little lonely, it was conceivable that the result would be disappointing. Thinking of this, the 4 young god kings could not help but shake their heads and sigh. While sympathizing with Nangong Nihuang, they were also puzzled. As the 4 walked into the distance, they discussed telepathically. "Do you think Miss Nangong has expressed her feelings to the Alliance Master? More than half of the people in the boundless heaven continent know that Nangong Nihuang only has Kenshin in her eyes and has waited for more than 1,000 years. It's impossible that the Alliance Master doesn't know about this." Looking at Miss Nangong's reaction, the Alliance Master probably still rejected her. Sigh, an almost perfect goddess like her can actually be rejected. It's really inconceivable. Are you kidding? Don't you know who the Alliance Master is? The world-famous Kenshin. How can he be measured by common sense? But I still don't understand. Nangong Nihuang is so infatuated with the Alliance Master and is so perfect herself. Why can't the Alliance Master include her in his harem? That's right. For a supreme powerhouse like the Alliance Master, it's natural for him to have 3,000 beauties in his harem. Since Miss Nangong has already taken the initiative, the Alliance Master should have accepted her. After all, one more won't make a difference. The 4 young god kings expressed that they could not understand and walked away while discussing. Ji Tianxing sat alone in the study for a while. When the messenger guard came to report that the 100 domain masters had gathered in the meeting hall, he got up and left the study. Night had already fallen, and the meeting hall of the Divine Palace was brightly lit. When Ji Tianxing stepped into the hall, the 100 domain masters had already arrived and stood in 2 rows in the hall. Ji Tianxing walked to the throne at the head of the table, and all the domain masters bowed in greeting. After greeting each other, Ji Tianxing sat down and began the meeting. Tonight's meeting was mainly to instruct and arrange some tasks for the 100 domain masters, as well as give them some words of encouragement and praise. The purpose was to let the domain masters be loyal to their duties and work wholeheartedly. Chapter 4198. Although it was useless to only rely on words to govern the entire boundless heaven continent, no matter how high Ji Tianxing's prestige was, and no matter how reasonable and intimidating his words were, it was difficult to make all the territorial lords obey him. To truly control the boundless heaven continent, one still needed a clear system of rewards and punishments, clear and strict rules and laws, as well as powerful strength and abundant resources, and so on. However, this was the first time the 100 territorial lords had gathered to meet Ji Tianxing face to face, so they still had to go through the process. Ji Tianxing carried out the meeting in an orderly manner according to the established procedures. The 100 domain lords had all sworn the oath of surrender, and they were all very respectful. They also agreed to Ji Tianxing's instructions and requests without hesitation, saying that they would definitely complete the task and would not disappoint Kenshin. Just like that, the meeting ended after 4 hours. It was late at night. Ji Tianxing left the meeting hall and returned to his residence to meditate and cultivate. The 100 territorial lords dispersed. Some stayed in the cave abode temporarily, while others went to meet the clan leaders and sect masters of the 20 forces. This grand ceremony also gave the territorial lords, clan leaders, and sect masters a chance to meet face to face. Even if those territorial lords wanted to curry favor with those clan leaders and sect masters, Ji Tianxing did not care. In his opinion, it would also be helpful to maintain the stability of the boundless heaven continent if the territorial lords, clan leaders, and sect masters became closer to each other. Anyway, these people had all sworn the oath of surrender, so no one dared to do anything out of line. Ji Tianxing was completely at ease. This grand ceremony lasted for 3 days and 3 nights before it ended. On the 4th day, more than 1 million people left one after another. Next, the 100 territorial lords also bade farewell to Ji Tianxing and left the 9 palace grotto heaven with their guards. On the 5th day, more than a dozen leaders of the ancient clans and sects also bade farewell to Ji Tianxing and left. On the 6th day, only the guard army and a few hundred disciples of the Nangong clan were left in the 9 palace grotto heaven. The grand ceremony was over, and more than 1 million people had left. However, the venue had to be demolished and cleaned, so it was naturally done by these people. Nangong Buhua led more than 6,000 men and entered a tense and busy state. After 2 months of tempering and experimenting, he had already entered the state long ago and practically took over the affairs of the boundless heaven continent. Almost every day, there would be memorials and letters sent to the 9 defense grotto heaven from various regions, forces, and empires. Nangong Buhua would personally look through the numerous official affairs and make appropriate decisions. He would only ask for Ji Tianxing's advice when he couldn't make up his mind or when he had a difficult decision to make. Of course, now that the situation in the boundless heaven continent was stable, this kind of major event would also become fewer and fewer. On the 10th day, the venue and the subsequent cleanup work were all finished. The 9 royals' cave abode was peaceful again. At noon, Ji Tianxing steered the god-slaying battleship and took Nangong Nihuang, Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, Yuchi Po, and the others out of the 9 imperial grotto heaven. Today was the day of his departure. Nangong Buhua, the captains of the guard corps, and the governors sent him out of the 9 defenses cave heaven and into the vast sky. After the god-slaying battleship disappeared into the horizon, Nangong Buhua brought everyone back to the 9 defense grotto heaven and continued to handle the complicated official affairs. Although the leaders of the 20 ancient clans and sects all knew that Ji Tianxing was leaving today and heading to other continents. Previously, the various forces had also expressed that they were willing to send hundreds of elites to follow Ji Tianxing into battle. After all, they were all under the command of the rebel alliance. If each of them sent hundreds of people, they would have an army of 10,000 people in total. However, Ji Tianxing rejected everyone's suggestion and only brought Nangong Nihuang and the others with him instead of a large group of soldiers. Moreover, apart from Nangong Buhua, no one knew his goal and whereabouts at the moment. The god-slaying battleship had been flying in the sky for 2 hours. Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, and the others couldn't help but urge Nangong Nihuang to ask Ji Tianxing where they were heading to. Seeing the 4 young god kings' expectant and curious faces, Nangong Nihuang coldly reprimanded them. If the alliance leader wants us to know where we are going next, he will naturally tell us. Since the alliance leader didn't tell everyone, it means that the goal still needs to be kept a secret. You guys are so anxious to know the alliance leader's goal. Aren't you afraid of leaking the secret and ruining the alliance leader's plans? After being rebuked by her, the 4 young god kings were embarrassed and speechless. All right. You are still the most thoughtful. We were reckless. You are a girl. You are right. But, Miss Nangong, don't you want to know which continent the alliance leader is going to attack? Nangong Nihuang didn't hesitate and replied expressionlessly, I don't want to. No matter which continent the alliance leader is going to attack, he has his reasons. What we need to do is listen to his arrangements and execute his orders, not speculate about what the alliance leader is going to do. There's no way to continue this conversation. The 4 young god kings were embarrassed and speechless. Only Nangong Ao, who had long understood Nangong Nihuang's character, didn't feel depressed. Instead, he smiled. Seeing the other 3 guys being defeated, he was secretly pleased. After all, the 4 of them were the best of the younger generation. They were relatively young high-level god kings. Everyone had their own principles and pride. They also had the intention to compete with each other. No one was willing to submit to the other. Unexpectedly, the 4 men, who were all high-level god kings, couldn't even compare to a middle-level god king girl. They were speechless and had no temper. Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, and Yuchi Pa all shook their heads and dispersed. They returned to their rooms to cultivate. Only Nangong Ao stayed in place. He winked at Nangong Nihuang and asked, "Miss, have you confessed to Kenshin?" Nangong Nihuang didn't say a word. She rolled her eyes at him coldly. Nangong Ao smiled and then asked, "Well, I know things may not go so smoothly, but don't be discouraged. As the old saying goes, there is a mountain between a man and a woman. There is a layer of gauze between a woman and a man. Even if Kenshin doesn't understand romance and is a blockhead, as long as you are hot enough, you can melt him sooner or later. Besides, Kenshin is not really a vegetarian. He has 2 wives. As long as you continue to work hard and let him see your sincerity and affection, I believe you will become the 3rd one sooner or later." Before Nangong Ao could finish speaking, Nangong Nihuang, who was a little embarrassed, waved her hand and slashed at him. Although it wasn't a real fight, the lethality of the saber light wasn't strong. However, this method was very effective. Nangong Ao immediately shut his mouth obediently. Nangong Nihuang couldn't be bothered to listen to his nonsense. She turned and left. Returning to her exclusive room, she entered the secret room to meditate. It took her a quarter of an hour to calm down her chaotic emotions before she could cultivate. Chapter 4199. Time always passed quickly during peaceful days. Half a month passed in a flash. The boundless heaven continent returned to peace, and even the undercurrent was gradually disappearing. The remaining forces of the Imperial Tutor and the Azura God Emperor were mostly wiped out, except for a few who escaped to other continents. The ancient clans, top forces, and sects that had once maintained a neutral and wait-and-see attitude obediently went into hiding, as if they were hiding from the world. Now that the boundless heaven continent was Kenshin's territory, they did not dare to have any ideas. It would be good enough if they were not punished by Kenshin. After all, the 20 forces and 100 territorial masters under Kenshin were unprecedentedly loyal to Kenshin. As long as Kenshin gave the order, he did not need to be famous at all. The forces under his command could sweep away all obstacles. Due to Kenshin's supreme prestige and the fact that 90% of the people supported and believed in him, the replacement of the system and laws of the boundless heaven continent was also proceeding exceptionally smoothly. Nangong Buhua was extremely busy every day, but he never complained about being tired. Instead, he enjoyed it, because Kenshin trusted him and completely handed over the boundless heaven continent to him. And he could use his own ability to govern the boundless heaven continent to become more perfect, peaceful, and beautiful. It was also a very fulfilling thing. This could not only prove his talent and ability to Kenshin, many ancient clans, and the people of the boundless heaven continent. Thousands of years later, tens of thousands of years later, he would still be able to leave his name in history. This was the lifelong pursuit and dream of many immortal king experts. At the same time, the god-slaying battleship crossed half of the boundless heaven continent and arrived at the southern border. If they flew another 10,000 miles forward, they would arrive at the vast Xiaolong territorial waters. At this time, Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, and the others who had been cultivating in the room gathered together to discuss quietly. They were discussing the same topic. Which continent would Kenshin attack? We are at the south of the continent, and the Xiaolong territorial waters are in front of us. Now it seems that the leader's target can only be the Reincarnation Island or the Boundless Heaven continent. That's right. The Qiankuan continent is to our east. If the leader wants to attack the Qiankuan continent, he must pass through the Wuji territorial waters. The primal chaos continent is the furthest away from us. Not only are there two sea regions between us, there is also the reincarnation island between us. Therefore, the Qiankuan continent and the primal chaos continent can be eliminated. Since I have to choose between the reincarnation island and the firmament land, I will choose the firmament land. That's because as long as we keep flying south, we'll be able to reach it in half a month. According to what you said, we can reach the reincarnation island in half a month if we head southeast. I think it's more likely that the Alliance Master will choose Reincarnation Island. After all, the territory of the Reincarnation Island is even smaller. With the number of people we have, it won't be too difficult to take over the Reincarnation Island. If we attack the Firmament Continent, I feel that we have too few people. You're worrying for nothing, aren't you? With the prestige of our Alliance Master, as long as we raise our arms and call for action, who would dare to disobey? I'm afraid that as soon as we arrive at the Firmament Continent, as soon as the Alliance Master shows his name, there will be thousands of experts coming to join us. The 4 young God Kings were gathered in a room, arguing endlessly around a jade table. When they were thirsty, they would even brew a cup of tea to drink. At this moment, Nangong Nihuang's voice suddenly came from outside the door. The 4 of you, don't hide inside and whisper. The Alliance Master has ordered that he has an important task for us. Open the door. Nangong Nihuang's somewhat cold and mature voice made the 4 young God Kings who were whispering immediately restrain their expressions. They immediately resumed their upright and still posture, as if they had done nothing at all. Nangong Ao took the initiative to open the door, and Nangong Nihuang walked in with a few jade slip. As usual, she was swift and decisive. She didn't talk nonsense with them and directly threw the 4 jade slips on the jade table. Each of you will have a jade slip. Inside it are the 3 super skills that the Alliance Master has imparted to us. They are used to hide one's aura, disguise one's appearance, and investigate. The Alliance Master has asked us to comprehend and master the 3 super skills within 20 days. Because in 20 days, we will use these super skills and secret skills to carry out an important task. The 4 young God Kings were stunned for a moment. Then, they revealed expressions of surprise and disbelief. They subconsciously picked up the jade slips and read the super skills recorded inside. Nangong Nihuang crossed her arms in front of her, hugging the huge sin. She looked down at everyone and said with an indifferent expression, "There is no need to doubt. I have carefully examined and studied them. They are all super skills of the king level. Every single one of these secret magics can be considered as the most powerful secret magics of our clans." A simple sentence was enough to prove how exquisite and precious the 3 super skills that Ji Tianxing had imparted to them were. The 4 young God Kings were ecstatic, as if they had been hit by a heaven-shaking prize. They immediately became emotional, and their excitement overflowed. However, Nangong Ao was the first to react. His surprise and excitement turned into a helpless and self-mocking smile. 3 sets of supreme-grade king-level ultimate skills? He actually wants us to master them in just 20 days? Does the Alliance Master have some misunderstanding about us? He can't be thinking that we have heaven-defying comprehension and aptitude like him, right? The other 3 also reacted, and the joy in their hearts disappeared in an instant, and was replaced by a helpless expression. To be honest, the Alliance Master thinks too highly of us. Although we are listed as the 10 heavenly kings of the younger generation in the boundless heaven continent. But to be honest, in front of the Alliance Master's standards and requirements, we are just trash. Master these 3 super skills in 20 days? What the hell? It's already amazing that I can understand and memorize it smoothly. They had just been hit by a huge surprise, but in the blink of an eye, they realized that they were too weak to digest this gift. One could imagine how the 4 young God Kings felt. Fortunately, Nangong Nihuang saw that they were so depressed and timely enlightened them. Since the Alliance Master is sure that we can complete it, then we can definitely do it. Everyone, don't worry. Other than the 3 super skills, there are also the Alliance Master's insights and cultivation experiences in the Jade Slip. I suggest that everyone first memorize the 3 super skills before learning the Alliance Master's insight. It should be twice the result with half the effort. The few young God Kings hurriedly used their divine senses to explore the Jade Slip. Indeed, they found that there were a few insights recorded in the Jade Slip. Instantly, the 4 of them heaved a huge sigh of relief. They revealed expressions of relief and regained their joyful smiles. Phew! The Alliance Master is so considerate. He almost scared me to death. Look at how useless you are. I was already mentally prepared. If the Alliance Master says we can do it, then we can definitely do it. We have to do it even if we can't. Brothers, the Alliance Master has given us such a valuable gift. We can't disappoint the Alliance Master, and we can't embarrass the clan. Alright, don't waste time. Start cultivating in seclusion right away. Chapter 4200. With 3 top-notch techniques, the 4 young divine kings stopped discussing which continent Ji Tianxing was going to attack. Ji Tianxing trusted them so much and had such high hopes for them. He had even given them such a surprise gift. They knew that it would be too embarrassing if they couldn't master 3 divine abilities within 20 days. Most importantly, they would betray the Alliance leader's trust and lose to the others. Therefore, without needing Nangong Nihuang to say anything, the 4 of them put away the Jade Slips and went back to their rooms to cultivate. Nangong Nihuang didn't stay idle either. She also went back to her room and entered the secret room to cultivate. After all, she was a woman. She was more meticulous and better at figuring out Ji Tianxing's thoughts. While the 4 of them were still discussing where Ji Tianxing was going to attack, she already had an answer in her heart. It wasn't the Firmament Continent, it was the Reincarnation Island. She also guessed that Ji Tianxing wanted them to master the 3 techniques as soon as possible so that they could go to the Reincarnation Island to carry out the investigation mission. She had even been thinking about how to help Ji Tianxing during this time. She had been deducing and imagining how she would deploy the attack on the Reincarnation Island if she was the one planning it. The first step she could think of was to hide after entering the Reincarnation Island and send out elite experts to scout for information. She had to understand the situation on the Reincarnation Island and the forces under the command of the god of the underworld before coming up with a plan. The next plan of action could be based on Ji Tianxing's process of conquering the boundless heaven continent. Of course, she would use the name of Kenshin to contact the major ancient clans and top forces on the Reincarnation Island. No matter what method she used, she would first win over a group of experts and forces to be the foundation of the attack on the Reincarnation Island. Next, she would attack and subdue the leaders of the various territories on the Reincarnation Island one by one. When the forces grew stronger, things would become much simpler. Nangong Nihuang deduced the process and step. After repeated verification, she felt that there shouldn't be much of a deviation. Then, she painstakingly deduced the details of every step of the plan, trying to minimize the flaws and omissions. Just like this, she had already unknowingly recorded a large amount of information in the Jade Slip. If Ji Tianxing asked her to come up with a plan as soon as possible, or the deployment of the attack on the Reincarnation Island, she only needed to tidy it up a little before presenting it to Ji Tianxing. As for now, she didn't have to think about these questions anymore. After she collected her thoughts, she focused on comprehending the 3 divine abilities. Although she was not as strong as Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, and the others. However, she was also very unyielding. She was determined to surpass those 4 fellows and not be looked down upon by them. The deity-slaying battleship kept flying non-stop. After entering the Xiaolong Sea area, it continued to fly southeast. Just as Nangong Nihuang had speculated, the god-slaying battleship's target was the Reincarnation Island. Even though the battleship had been hurrying along, the interior of the battleship was very quiet. Everyone was focused on cultivating. Only the White Dragon was left alone in the cockpit, controlling the battleship alone. Ji Tianxing had already entered the distorted spacetime of the Divine Pagoda to continue cultivating and comprehending the heaven punishment divine technique. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others had all suffered some injuries during the battle in the Shura Cave Heaven. In the past 3 months, they had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime. After more than 10 years, their injuries had basically healed. It was worth mentioning that Ji Wuhan's heaven-defying talent and potential were truly displayed after he broke through to the Divine King realm. It had been less than a year since he broke through to the Divine King realm. He had only cultivated in the distorted spacetime for more than 30 years. Now, he had broken through to the second level of the Divine King realm. With his talent and speed of breakthrough, the miracle of breaking through 1 level per year would probably happen in the next few years. From Ji Tianxing to Bai Feng, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Nangong Nihuang, and the others, to Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang, everyone was working hard to cultivate and become stronger. At this time, the Reincarnation Island, the Firmament Mainland, and the Qiankuan Mainland were in a state of worry, excitement, and anticipation. These 3 mainlands were located in the east, southeast, and south of the Boundless Heaven Mainland respectively. They were the same distance from the Boundless Heaven Mainland. Since a few months ago, the news of the Kenshin and the Rebel Alliance had spread to these 3 mainlands. Many experts and forces had heard the news. Later on, the Rebel Alliance had won successive battles, and the Imperial Tutor was completely helpless. In the end, the Shura God Emperor's clone was killed by the Kenshin. The Imperial Tutor and his army were annihilated, and the entire Boundless Heaven Mainland was controlled by the Kenshin. A series of news spread across the 3 mainlands. Not only did the top experts and forces know, but even the common people knew. The bigwigs and territorial lords who controlled the mainlands were naturally worried. They were as anxious as ants on a hot pan, but they did not know what to do. They knew very well that the Kenshin had already publicly announced that they would overthrow the dark reign of the 5-god emperor, rescue the 5 mainlands of the heavenly realm, and let all the people of the heavenly realm regain their freedom. Then they, the god emperor's lackeys and lackeys, would naturally be the targets of the Kenshin's beating and killing. However, the Kenshin's strength was so terrifying that even the clones of the 5-god emperor were killed. Ordinary people like them could only be killed by the Kenshin. After thinking about it, they could not find any way to stop the Kenshin's attack. They could only pray that the Kenshin would attack the other mainlands first and give them a little more time. When the common people of the 3 mainlands heard this series of news, they were wild with excitement and rushed to spread the news. Their hearts were filled with excitement and anticipation. They naturally hated the dark reign of the 5-god emperor, but because of their low status and strength, they could only swallow their anger. Now, Kenshin raised his arms and shouted loudly. Heroes gathered and successfully occupied the boundless heaven continent, ending the dark reign of the Azura god emperor. This allowed all the common people to see the hope of escaping the sea of suffering and embracing freedom. Every day, they hoped that the Kenshin would arrive on their mainlands as soon as possible, overthrow the god emperor's rule, and return their freedom. In this way, the common people of the 3 mainlands were already praising Kenshin's prowess and praying that he would appear as soon as possible, even before he started attacking the next mainland. If it were any other expert, they might not have such an effect. At the very least, they would not be able to win the respect and worship of hundreds of millions of people of the heavenly realm. It could not be helped. Kenshin's prowess was too great. It could be said that he was a household name in the heavenly realm. Kenshin's noble character was also respected and admired by hundreds of millions of people. The common people of the 3 mainlands had already regarded him as the savior of the world, the saint who stood on behalf of the Tianxing. On the other side, in the center of the Reincarnation Island, in the sacred and dignified Yudu City, Commander Styx and Marshal Blood Prison had already gathered the 6 great divine generals and the 18 region lords to discuss countermeasures. In addition, the 9 ancient clans on the Reincarnation Island had also received an invitation from Commander Styx to participate in the discussion on how to deal with the Kenshin's attack. However, only 3 ancient clans were willing to head to Yudu. The other 6 were vague and made excuses. Chapter 4201. The 3 ancient clans that were ordered to rush to Yudu to discuss how to fight against the Kenshin had long pledged allegiance to the god of the underworld. Even if the god of the underworld's true body wasn't on Reincarnation Island, they still had to obey the orders of Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison. The meeting hall of Yudu Divine Palace was brightly lit, and the atmosphere was solemn. Commander Mingi, Marshal Blood Prison, 6 great generals, 18 region masters, and the strong practitioners of the 3 ancient clans were gathered in the hall. The dozens of Divine King's strong practitioners in the hall were the most powerful and authoritative rulers of Reincarnation Island. They could mobilize 80% of the strong practitioners and military forces of Reincarnation Island. Logically speaking, with so many strong practitioners united and gathered together to discuss several countermeasures and plans, they should be confident in defending against the Kenshin's attack. However, after an entire day of discussion, they still couldn't decide which plan to execute. No one had the confidence to defend against the Kenshin's possible attack. The only thing that everyone was sure of was that among the Firmament Continent, the Qiankuan Continent, and the Reincarnation Island, Sword God was most likely to attack the Reincarnation Island. The first reason was that Reincarnation Island had the smallest territory and the weakest power among the 3 continents, making it the easiest to attack. The second reason was that Reincarnation Island was located in the center of the God world. The other 4 continents were located in the northwest, northeast, southeast, and southwest directions of Reincarnation Island. The distance from Reincarnation Island to any of the continents wasn't too far. In other words, Reincarnation Island was the core of the God world, the most important continent. As long as he occupied the Reincarnation Island, the Sword God would be able to attack any continent he wished. He would be able to advance or retreat as he wished. Therefore, Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison were very sure that Kenshin would attack Reincarnation Island first. However, the problem was that Kenshin hadn't shown up yet, and there was no news about it. No one knew when Kenshin would attack, or what method or scheme they would use to attack. Therefore, it was difficult for them to take specific precautions. Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison could only make some arrangements to strengthen the defense of Yudu and keep the 18 regions on alert. Originally, the Blood Hell Marshal wanted the 18 domain lords to stay in their respective regions and lead the soldiers to be on guard and strengthen their defenses. However, Commander Mingi suggested that when Kenshin attacked the Boundless Heaven continent, they would attack the regions one by one and force the region masters to surrender. This method made the Imperial Tutor helpless. If they didn't learn their lesson, Kenshin would definitely repeat the same trick and conquer the 18 regions. Therefore, Commander Mingi requested the 18 region masters to stay in Yudu and control their own regions would be controlled remotely. Only a small portion of their opinions to stay would to do so to twos. Those who agreed to stay in Yudu were to their territories were to stay in the region to stay. To be agreed to stay twos to be to stay to give to their territories and to be controlled to be to stay. Of them was to be s to be woods to be safe to s to be to stay. However, their own territories were to be given to the Kenshin. Without them, the soldiers under their command wouldn't be able to defend against the Kenshin's attack. Commander Mingi refuted them on the spot. Even if they stayed to guard their own territories, they wouldn't be able to defend against the Kenshin's attack. Many of the region masters were choked to the point that they couldn't refute, and their expressions turned ugly. Although they didn't say anything, they were still unconvinced and muttered to themselves, "Even if we stay in Yudu, can we really fight against the Kenshin? Even if all of us work together, I'm afraid we won't be able to defeat the Kenshin, right? Seeing that the region masters were speechless, Marshal Blood Prison couldn't say anything more. He could only follow Commander Mingi's suggestion and let the 18 region masters stay in Yudu. However, each region master could transfer a portion of their loyal soldiers to Yudu to set up defenses. This way, these region masters would have soldiers under their command. Only then would they feel safe and be willing to compromise. Commander Mingi agreed to this suggestion, but he also raised a condition. That was to bring the families of each region master to Yudu. In name, it was to protect the families of the region masters. After all, Yudu City was safer. However, in reality, this was also a disguised form of coercion to force the region masters to listen to orders. In the end, Commander Mingi decided on a countermeasure in a domineering manner and ended the meeting. After the meeting ended, everyone started to move. They had to take advantage of the time before the Kenshin arrived at Reincarnation Island to complete the corresponding deployment and defense. 20 days passed in a flash. That evening, the god-slaying battleship silently landed on Reincarnation Island without attracting anyone's attention. At this time, Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime for close to 3 years. His abilities had improved greatly again. Nangong Nihuang, Nangong Ao, Yu Chi Po, Lan Kai, Zhan Wudi, and the others also ended their seclusion. These 5 young divine kings all completed the tasks that Ji Tianxing had given them within the time limit. They used 18 to 20 days to master the 3 divine arts that Ji Tianxing had given them. Nangong Ao and Lan Kai, who were the most talented, only used 18 days to master them. Yu Chi Po and Nangong Nihuang used 19 days, while Zhan Wudi used exactly 20 days. When the 5 young divine kings walked out of the secret chamber and met in the meeting hall, Ji Tianxing also appeared. When he saw that the 5 young divine kings had completed their tasks, he smiled with relief. In fact, this was also a test that he had given them to test their talents and aptitude. The results were gratifying. The 5 young divine kings were all outstanding, 1 in a million geniuses. After the 2 sides greeted each other, Ji Tianxing said to everyone, "Very good. I am very pleased that all of you have mastered the 3 divine arts within the time limit. It just so happens that we have landed on Reincarnation Island today. Immediately, you will be able to use the newly mastered divine arts to complete a very important task. I'm sure you've already guessed my intentions when you're cultivating those 3 divine abilities and consummate skills. That's right, your task is to disguise yourself and sneak into the various regions of Reincarnation Island to investigate the situation and news of each region. We have no informants on Reincarnation Island, nor do we have any forces or soldiers that we can use. Therefore, you must understand the deployment and movements of Reincarnation Island and investigate which ancient clans and forces might be of use to us. I will keep in touch with all of you at all times, and according to your feedback, I will deploy the tasks according to the situation. It is very likely that you will use the newly mastered divine arts to complete some assassination task. How about it? Does it sound very dangerous and exciting?" Nangong Nihuang, Zhan Wudi, and the others were full of anticipation and nodded in agreement. Ji Tianxing asked again, "Then do you have the courage to attempt this difficult task?" Everyone was excited. They rubbed their hands together, eager to give it a try. They shouted in unison, "Of course!" Chapter 4202. The first day the god-slaying battleship landed on Reincarnation Island. In the evening, Nangong Nihuang was the first to leave the battleship and sneak into the Cold Moon domain to gather information. She used the divine arts and secret techniques that Ji Tianxing taught her to change her appearance and aura. She completely hid her true face and started her operation in the Cold Moon domain. Her target was the Cold Moon domain and another region next to it. She needed to investigate the situation within 10 days. Among the 5 young god kings, she was the weakest as she was a mid-level god king. Therefore, Ji Tianxing took good care of her. Before she left, He gave her a king-level high-grade life-saving divine weapon. The god-slaying battleship continued forward. In the evening of the second day, Nangong Ao left the battleship in the Heavenly Jewel region. He also used his divine arts and secret techniques to change his appearance and aura. He started his operation in the Heavenly Jewel region. His target was the Heavenly Jewel region and the 3 surrounding regions. In the morning of the 4th day, Zhang Wudi left the god-slaying battleship in the White Lotus region and started his operation. His mission was the same as Nangong Ao's. He needed to investigate the situation in 4 regions. In the next few days, Lan Kai and Yuchi Po also left the god-slaying battleship and entered the designated regions to start their operations. The 2 young god kings each had to investigate 4 regions. In this way, the 5 god kings were in charge of investigating 18 regions. As long as they successfully completed their missions, Ji Tianxing would be able to grasp the situation of the entire Reincarnation Island. In the end, the god-slaying battleship went to Yudu. Ji Tianxing wanted to sneak into Yudu and personally investigate the situation there. Decades ago, when he left the god world for the Dragon Realm, he went through the space-time tunnel of Reincarnation Island. At that time, he stirred up a storm on Reincarnation Island and created chaos. He even fought with many strong practitioners. He used a series of schemes to deceive many God King's strong practitioners in Yudu and sneaked into the Creation Divine Palace to steal the Creation Divine Pearl. Yun Yao obtained the Creation Divine Pearl and gathered the 7 Divine Pearls. Her 3 souls and 7 spirits returned, and she obtained all of Goddess Yaoguang's memories and inheritance. She successfully broke through to the God King realm. Even though it had been many years, when Ji Tianxing came to Yudu again, he couldn't help thinking about what had happened back then. After disguising himself, he turned into an ordinary middle-aged man of the god race. He stood outside the gates of Yudu City and thought to himself, "The Fortune Divine Palace has been destroyed, and the space-time altar under the abyss of reincarnation is also damaged." He wondered if they had been able to repair it after so many years. With Commander Styx and Marshal Blood Prison's intelligence, they must have guessed that I would come to attack Reincarnation Island. I wonder how they would react? I'm afraid they don't have any good countermeasures and can only gather all the region masters and strong practitioners to hide in Yudu City and wait for me to appear? Yudu City in the evening was very quiet, and the atmosphere was even a little heavy. There were 4 gates in the north, south, east, and west, but only the south gate was open. The other 3 gates were closed. Moreover, there was only a narrow passageway at the south city gate, which was only wide enough for 1 horse carriage to pass through. Inside and outside the city gates, there were also 200 elite guards standing guard. They were all Divine Lord Realm experts. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that there were actually 10 Divine King Realm experts hidden among them. Through this point, Ji Tianxing could conclude that Yudu City was definitely heavily guarded and jittery at the slightest sound. It was probably because the commoners in the city had also felt the unusual aura of danger, so they didn't enter or leave the city. Occasionally, 1 or 2 commoners would leave the city, but they would also undergo strict interrogation and inspection. Ji Tianxing observed for a moment more and discovered that the defensive formation of Yudu City had also been activated. There were also 2 small-scale god formations at the city gates that were in an operating state. In this way, if there was any abnormality at the city gates, they could immediately seal it off with the formation. Luckily, when Ji Tianxing landed outside the city gates, he had already changed his appearance and concealed his aura. He even entered a state of invisibility. Even though he stood at the gates for 100 breaths of time, no one discovered him. After roughly understanding the situation in Yudu, he walked towards the city gates. The guards and Divine King Realm experts guarding the city gates all stood on the spot with stern expressions. Without seeing anyone enter or leave the city gates, they naturally wouldn't move around casually. As a result, when Ji Tianxing walked past them, The distance between them was less than 6 feet. Yet, he wasn't discovered. The 2 king-level high-grade god formations at the city gates also couldn't detect Ji Tianxing's presence and didn't send out any alarms. In this way, Ji Tianxing easily entered Yudu City. Under the setting sun, Yudu City still looked the same as before. The city was majestic and vast. The streets in the city were straight and wide, crisscrossing and dividing the huge city into countless regions. In every square region, there were rows upon rows of palaces and residences, giving off a dignified and imposing aura. However, at this moment, Yudu City was completely silent. It was no longer as bustling as before. There were no pedestrians on the street. There were only scattered yellow leaves, making it look very desolate. The shops on the streets were all tightly shut, and no sound could be heard. The entire Yudu City seemed very quiet, as if it was an empty city. However, that wasn't the case. After Ji Tianxing used his consciousness to investigate, he discovered that in every palace and residence, there were hundreds or even thousands of commoners. However, those commoners were all hiding in underground palaces or secret chambers. They were either meditating quietly or cultivating in seclusion. It was obvious that the commoners knew what was about to happen. However, they didn't escape Yudu. Instead, they stayed and hid, waiting for the arrival of danger. After all, in the entire Reincarnation Island, Yudu was the safest. It didn't take long for night to fall. Ji Tianxing, who was in an invisible state, walked around Yudu City casually, carefully investigating the situation in the city. For an entire night, he completely investigated Yudu City, which had a radius of 1,000 miles. He was very clear about the layout of the buildings in the city, the distribution of the 100,000 soldiers, and the grades and numbers of the various formations. There were no secrets in the entire Yudu City in front of him. He studied it thoroughly. The facts proved that Yudu City was indeed in a state of extreme alert. Its defense was more than 5 times stronger than usual. Not only were there 100,000 elite soldiers gathered in the city, but there were also 100,000 city guards and more than 5,000 Divine Lord Realm experts. As for Divine King Realm experts, there were more than 200 of them, and most of them were gathered in the Divine Palace in the center of the city. The Reincarnation Divine Palace was the core of Yudu City and also the sacred ground of Reincarnation Island. The palace complex with a radius of 50 miles was the residence of Commander Mingi and Martial Blood Prison, and its defense was the tightest. A total of 50,000 elite soldiers and 3,000 Divine Lord Realm experts guarded the Reincarnation Divine Palace day and night. In order not to alert the enemy, Ji Tianxing didn't rashly release his consciousness to investigate the situation in the Reincarnation Divine Palace. He was preparing to sneak into the Reincarnation Divine Palace to personally investigate and set up defenses. At this moment, Nangong Nihuang sent him a message to report the results of her investigation. Chapter 4203. Reporting to Alliance Master, after 8 days of searching and investigating, Anai Huang did not let you down and finally obtained the result. Cold Moon and Green Star domains are tight on the outside but loose on the inside. They seem to be in a state of panic and fear. In fact, most of the soldiers and generals left behind are of the middle and lower rank. Their abilities are weak and there is nothing to fear. Half of the god generals, commanders, and deputy generals are missing. We suspect that they have left the domains and are gathered in Yudu City. In addition, Anai Huang took the risk to sneak into the Domain Master's manor and didn't find any traces of the Domain Master. I suspect that I have entered Yudu under orders. If Alliance Master wants to take down Cold Moon and Green Star domains, Anai Huang estimates that you will be able to do so within 3 days. Nangong Nihuang sent a message to Ji Tianxing. The report was brief but clear and straightforward. Simply put, the 2 domains that she was ordered to investigate seemed to be heavily guarded, but in fact, the morale of the army was lax and they didn't have much combat power. After all, those left behind were all of the middle and lower rank. The high-end combat power and strong practitioners were nowhere to be seen. They had probably been transferred to Yudu City. Even the domain masters of the two domains weren't around. One could imagine that the soldiers left behind didn't have much cohesion, let alone morale. If Ji Tianxing wanted to take down those two domains, he could do so in 3 days at most. It would be effortless. Nangong Nihuang's report just happened to confirm Ji Tianxing's guess. No wonder the defense of Yudu City had been strengthened by more than 5 times. Other than the 100,000 city guards, there were also 100,000 elite soldiers and 5,000 Divine Lord Realm experts. It turned out that those were all forces transferred from various domains. From the looks of it, it's just as I guessed. Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison know that I will break through the various domains one by one before finally besieging Yudu City. In order to prevent the various domains from falling one after another, they mobilized the domain masters and elite experts of the various domains to Yudu City. By doing so, they can increase their chances of winning. At the very least, they can defend Yudu City for a few more days. However, those 18 domains have given up in disguise. Ha ha! Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison made this decision for the sake of the overall situation. I wonder what those domain masters think? These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianxing's mind, and he couldn't help but sneer. Then, he sent a message to Nangong Nihuang, telling her to continue hiding in the realm of Cold Moon and be on standby. Since Ji Tianxing was 80% sure that the 18 region lords and their elites were all gathered in Yudu City and in the Reincarnation Divine Palace, Ji Tianxing didn't care. In that case, there was no need for him to enter the Samsara Divine Palace alone to investigate the situation. After all, he didn't plan to face Commander Styx, Marshal Bloodhell, and the others yet, and he wouldn't fight them right away. He hid himself in Yudu City and continued to investigate. He carefully studied the city protection formation and defensive formation of Yudu City, deducing the route of the enemy's troops. 3 days later, he finished studying all of this and started to study the important locations near Yudu City. For example, there were several underground palaces hidden deep underground, as well as 2 mysterious altars and formations. He had to be fully prepared in case Commander Nether River, the Blood Prison Marshal, and the others came up with some tricks through the hidden underground palaces, altars, and grand spell formations. In addition, the Abyss of Reincarnation and the passageway between the 2 worlds were also targets he had to investigate. He had to be on guard against Commander Nether River and the others repairing the space-time altar and the passageway between the 2 worlds. In the future, if Commander Nether River and the others led the army through the passageway between the 2 worlds and escaped to the Dragon Realm, it would be troublesome. During this time, Nangong Ao, Zhan Wudi, Lan Kai, Yuchi Po, and the others also sent him messages one after another, reporting the situation to him. The 4 young god kings risked their lives and the results of their investigation were similar to Nangong Nihuang's. The various regions were the same. They seemed to be heavily guarded and had used all of their troops to defend. But in reality, the soldiers guarding the various regions were all mid-level and low-level soldiers. Those god generals, commanders, and other high-end combat forces had all gathered in Yudu City with their domain lords. As a result, the 18 regions were in a state of weak defense and empty military forces. Ji Tianxing could be completely sure that many domain lords and experts were gathered in Yudu City, waiting to have a decisive battle with him. However, in the 4 young god kings' reports, there were a few very important pieces of information that allowed Ji Tianxing to see a breakthrough. The most powerful forces on Reincarnation Island were the 18 domain lords and the 9 great ancient clans. As early as a month ago, Commander Nether River and the Blood Prison Marshal had issued an order to gather the domain lords and ancient clans in Yudu City. The 18 domain lords were naturally acting on orders. Not only did they bring the elite experts under their command, but even their families were also brought to Yudu City. But what was interesting was that among the 9 great ancient clans, Only 3 were completely loyal to the god of the underworld. The moment they received the order, they rushed to Yudu City. As for the other 6 ancient clans, they used all kinds of reasons and excuses to shirk responsibility and refuse to gather in Yudu City. Just 5 days ago, one of the ancient clans could not withstand the repeated persuasion and threats of Commander Nether River and the Blood Prison Marshal. He had no choice but to lead his elite experts and rush to Yudu City. As a result, Commander Mingi had the support of 4 ancient clans under his command. The other 5 ancient clans were still bitterly holding on, dealing with the repeated threats of the Blood Prison Marshal. No one knew what kind of tricks and schemes the Blood Prison Marshal and Commander Nether River would use to force the ancient clans to surrender. No one knew how long the 5 ancient clans could hold on. But one thing was for sure. The fact that the 5 ancient clans were unwilling to head to Yudu City proved that they were disloyal. To Commander Nether River and the rest, this was disloyalty. But to Ji Tianqing, this was a breakthrough. As a result, after Ji Tianqing received this information, he made a prompt decision to leave Yudu City and pay a visit to the 5 ancient clans. Although he did not need the support of the 5 ancient clans to successfully take over Reincarnation Island, there was a huge problem. There would definitely be a huge battle, and there would definitely be tragic casualties on his side. Therefore, he had to think of a way to subdue the 5 ancient clans for his own use. Only then could he reduce the casualties and take over Reincarnation Island more easily. The key was that after he took over Reincarnation Island, he would need to appoint new domain lords and commanders to firmly control Reincarnation Island. He could not leave Nangong Nihuang, Nangong Ao, and the rest behind to be domain lords of Reincarnation Island. Therefore, the 5 ancient clans were the best candidate. After finding a breakthrough, Ji Tianqing's plan to take over Reincarnation Island was confirmed, and he officially began his operation. 2 days' journey away from Yudu City, there was an ancient pine grotto heaven in Cypress Pine region. It was the territory of the Pine Crane clan. According to Yuchi Po's report, the Blood Prison Marshal's messenger seemed to be in the ancient Pine Grotto heaven. He had been negotiating with the Pine Crane clan for a few days, but there was no conclusion yet. Therefore, Ji Tianqing made the ancient Pine Grotto heaven his first target. Chapter 4204. Ji Tianqing quietly left Yudu and rode the god-slaying battleship to Cypress Pine region. The estimated 2-day journey, with the god-slaying battleship's normal flying speed, arrived at ancient Pine Grotto heaven on the 3rd night. When he was still tens of thousands of miles away from ancient Pine Grotto heaven, Ji Tianqing put away the god-slaying battleship and concealed his aura. The entrance to the grotto heaven was at the peak of a towering mountain that was 3,000 feet tall. It was surrounded by lofty mountains and steep ridges with ancient pine trees. The peak of the mountain was flattened, and a plaza with a radius of 30 miles was built. It was paved with incomparably hard Qinggang divine stone. The array at the entrance was an altar. There were over 100 guards standing guard in the surroundings, and there were 4 God King experts in the lead. It could be seen that the guards had solemn expressions and murderous auras. They were very vigilant and alert. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was faced with 2 choices. He could either show himself openly and state his intentions. Since the Pine Crane clan refused to submit to Commander Mingi, they were most likely waiting for his arrival and wanted to follow him to overthrow the rule of the god of the underworld. Or perhaps, the Pine Crane clan believed that he could kill Commander Mingi and the others and successfully take over Reincarnation Island, so they wanted to follow him to reap the fruits of victory. No matter what the Pine Crane clan was thinking, they should be very welcoming of his arrival. The second choice was to wait for an opportunity and quietly sneak into ancient Pine Grotto heaven. If he cast spells to break the formation at the entrance of the grotto heaven, it would definitely alarm the guards. After some consideration, Ji Tianqing decided to wait patiently for a moment and look for an opportunity. The night was dark and the cold wind was rustling. Ji Tianxing originally thought that with Reincarnation Island's current tense and alert situation, no one would enter Reincarnation Island at this time. He didn't expect that something unexpected would happen. He waited for about 2 hours, and in the night sky not far away, there was a divine light speeding toward him. When he got closer, he could see that it was a divine ship carved with special patterns and emblems that represented a certain power. Ji Tianxing observed it carefully and frowned. Then he remembered that it seemed to be the emblem of Commander Mingi. In this special period, Commander Mingi must be guarding Yudu, so it was almost impossible for him to come to ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. Therefore, the people in the divine warship were most likely divine generals or messengers under Commander Mingi's command. The result was just as he expected. The divine ship stopped at the entrance of ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. 2 God King powerhouses in shining armor walked out of the divine ship with their heads held high. Behind the 2 God Kings was a group of guards in golden armor. There were 20 of them. This group of people walked to the entrance of ancient Pine Paradise with an arrogant and bossy attitude. A captain among the guards immediately shouted in a dignified tone, "Great Commander Mingi's messenger is here. Pine Crane Clan, hurry up and welcome him." The guards guarding the entrance of the Grotto Heaven were already on high alert when they saw the arrival of the divine warship. After seeing the person's attire and hearing what he said, a look of disgust appeared in his eyes. Obviously, the Pine Crane Clan hated the messenger of Commander Mingi very much. However, due to many reasons, they could not show their disgust, let alone resist by force. No matter how unwilling the captain of the Pine Crane Clan was, he could only lead the guards to bow and salute. "Greetings to Lord Messenger." The 100 guards saluted in a standard manner, but there was no sense of respect. Instead, there was some reluctance. However, the 2 messengers did not take it to heart. They only said with a cold face, "Hurry up and open the passage. I want to see Patriarch Pine Crane and pass on Great Commander Mingi's orders." The 2 captains of the Pine Crane clan had probably received orders from their clan long ago. They were stalling for time as much as possible. As a result, the 2 captains were rambling and trying to change the topic. They were stalling for time with the 2 messengers. They were unwilling to open the formation at the entrance of the Grotto Heaven. The 2 messengers saw through the clues. Their faces became even colder, and their attitudes became even more forceful and fierce. They repeatedly threatened and coerced the other party to open the entrance. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing could not help but frown. He thought to himself, "There's already a group of Commander Mingi's messengers that entered ancient Pine Paradise a few days ago to negotiate with the patriarchs of the Pine Crane clan. Several days have passed, and there's still no result. The second group of messengers has rushed over. I don't know what they're here for, but they've been blocked outside by the Pine Crane clan. Could it be that the negotiations between the first group of messengers and the Pine Crane clan have collapsed? The second group of messengers must have brought the fury of Commander Mingi to threaten the Pine Crane clan?" Thinking like this, it meant that the Pine Crane clan had not compromised. Ji Tianxing felt more confident. The 2 captains of the Pine Crane clan had been in a deadlock with the messengers for a long time. In the end, they had angered the 2 messengers. They had almost drawn their swords and killed them. The Pine Crane clan was certainly unwilling to shed all pretenses of cordiality and start a war with Commander Mingi during this special period. As a result, the 2 captains of the guards could only restrain their fury and were forced to open the entrance of the Grotto Heaven. The 2 messengers assumed a victorious posture. They led their subordinates and swaggered through the spatial gate, entering ancient Pine Paradise. The Pine Crane clan's guards were so angry that their eyes were about to spit fire. They gnashed their teeth and glared at the messengers, but there was nothing they could do. It was not until the messengers had entered ancient Pine Paradise and the guards had closed the grand array of the Grotto Heaven's entrance that they began to discuss and curse with righteous indignation. "Commander Mingi's lackeys have really gone too far. These guys are so snobbish and arrogant. They're really hateful. It's said that the Kenshin is about to reach Reincarnation Island. These guys won't live for long. Shut up. How can you say such things? Humph. Anyway, it's something that everyone knows. There are no outsiders here. What's wrong with saying it? The first group of messengers is still here. The second group of messengers is rushing over. I'm afraid that Commander Mingi is going to do something bad again. I'm really worried that the Patriarch and Elders won't be able to withstand the pressure and will yield to Commander Mingi. Don't worry. This is a major event that concerns the life and future of our Pine Crane clan. How can the Patriarch make a mistake? The example of the boundless heaven continent is right in front of us. Unless the true body of the god of the underworld returns, who can stop the Kenshin's attack? Commander Mingi and the Blood Prison Marshal have no choice but to fight to the death. But our Pine Crane clan can't make a mistake. Obviously, the ordinary disciples and guards of the Pine Crane clan all knew how to choose. Their stance was very firm. From this, it could be seen what kind of mentality the Pine Crane clan had. On the other side, the two messengers led the team and flew across the sky at lightning speed. They rushed toward the depths of ancient pine paradise. Along the way, the two messengers were also discussing with gloomy expressions. They cursed the guards guarding the grotto heaven's entrance. They really didn't know what was good for them and deserved to die. The 20 accompanying guards nodded repeatedly and did not forget to take the opportunity to flatter them. However, they had never imagined that the expert that caused them to be extremely anxious and terrified was silently following behind them. Chapter 4205. To the Pine Crane clan, the second batch of messengers was an uninvited guest that was annoying. However, to Ji Tianxing, it was an opportunity and a breakthrough. If the second batch of messengers had not arrived in time, it would have been difficult for him to sneak into ancient Pine Grotto Heaven without alerting anyone. He followed the second batch of messengers and flew across the night sky, heading straight for the depths of ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. Along the way, he could see the beautiful scenery of ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. However, it was late at night and it was quiet all around. There were no disciples of the Pine Crane clan. Presumably, under such a tense atmosphere, the disciples of the Pine Crane clan were not in the mood to come out and play. At the same time, in the depths of ancient Pine Grotto Heaven, there was a group of palaces that were lit up in the middle of the night. More than 100 magnificent palaces stood on top of more than 40 mountain peaks. They were arranged in picturesque disorder, forming a natural heaven and earth formation. This was the residence of the Pine Crane clan. The most majestic palace in the middle was the Pine Crane Palace. At this moment, the door of the main hall of the Pine Crane Palace was wide open. The main hall was brightly lit and dazzling. In the magnificent main hall, the Pine Crane clan leader sat on the gilded throne at the head of the hall. He was leaning on the wide back of the chair and holding his chin with one hand. He was in a daze. The clan leader was already over 26,000 years old. His strength had reached the later stage of the 9th-level Divine King realm. He was only one step away from the peak Divine King realm. It was a pity that he had been stuck in this realm for over 8,000 years. Without exceptional talent, aptitude, comprehension, and amazing opportunities and treasures, it would be difficult for him to become a peak Divine King in his life. This thin and skinny old man always liked to wear simple green clothes and black cloth shoes. He also wore a simple and old bamboo hat that had gone through the vicissitudes of life. He had a head full of gray and white sparse hair, but it was combed meticulously every day. His face was thin and his eyes were sunken. However, his eyes were clear and sharp. He always had a goatee. Judging from his appearance, the Pine Crane clan leader was not a flexible person. He was a stubborn and even paranoid old man. And that was indeed the case. In the main hall that was brightly lit, there were 2 high-level divine kings sitting on the 2 sides of the main hall. They were both wearing brocade clothes and luxurious divine crowns. With one look, one could tell that they were powerful and influential practitioners from Udu. These two were the first batch of messengers sent by Commander Stick. They had arrived at ancient Pine Grotto 5 days ago. Over the past 5 days, the two messengers had to negotiate with Patriarch Pine Crane and the elders of the Pine Crane clan in the main hall for a very long time. The two messengers tried every possible way to persuade Patriarch Song He, using both the carrot and the stick. However, they were still unable to change Patriarch Song He's mind, nor could they change Patriarch Song He's decision. The two of them had racked their brains and exhausted their mouths, but to no avail. Until today, both sides had lost their patience and were on the verge of fighting each other on the spot. But even then, Patriarch Song He still acted like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. He simply slumped on the throne and pretended to be in deep thought and rest with his eyes closed. The two messengers were completely helpless. They could only drink their tea with a black face. Behind the two of them, the 20 guards that accompanied them stood carefully. They didn't dare to make a single sound. The elders of the Pine Crane clan sat on the 2 large chairs on the left and right sides. Although they were accompanying the two messengers, the two sides had already reached an agreement. However, the negotiations between the two sides had already broken down. They sat there calmly, either closing their eyes to rest or quietly drinking tea. No one spoke a word. And the turning point of the situation was that the second batch of messengers sent by Commander Styx was about to arrive. As early as a few hours ago, the two messengers from the first batch received news that the second batch of messengers was about to arrive to deliver Commander Styx's latest orders. Although this made them feel like they were not trusted and were about to be abandoned, this was Commander Styx's decision. But this was Commander Styx's decision. They could only silently accept it. They had no right to object. After thinking it through, the two messengers felt a sense of relief. Since Commander Styx had sent the second batch of messengers to deal with Patriarch Song He, there was nothing for them to do. Therefore, both sides remained silent and quietly waited for the second batch of messengers to arrive. Time passed silently. Half an hour went by quickly. At this moment, a hazy divine light in the distant night sky was rapidly approaching. In just a few breaths, the divine light enveloped more than 20 figures and landed on the square outside the main hall. After the divine light dispersed, the two messengers and 20 golden-armored guards were revealed. Seeing this, the two messengers and 20 guards in the main hall stood up and walked out of the main hall to welcome the arrival of their colleagues. Even if the two sides had the same power, status, and rank in ancient Pine Grotto heaven, colleagues had to give face and show off. Because this represented Commander Styx's prestige. Since the two messengers walked out of the main hall with the guards, Patriarch Song He and the elders could no longer close their eyes and rest. They didn't want to submit to Commander Styx, but they couldn't openly rebel and challenge Commander Styx's prestige and bottom line. Otherwise, before Sword God could attack Reincarnation Island, the enraged Commander Nether River would make an example out of the Pine Crane tribe. One had to know that other than the Pine Crane clan, there were 4 other ancient clans that were also weighing the pros and cons. If the Pine Crane clan became the target of Commander Styx's prestige, it would be too unfair. Not long after, Patriarch Song He led a few elders to the square unhurriedly. At this moment, the two batches of messengers had already greeted each other. Patriarch Song He and a few other elders also stepped forward unwillingly to pay their respects to the second batch of messengers. In fact, both sides' attitudes were obvious. Even if the second batch of messengers came to persuade him, Patriarch Song He wouldn't compromise. However, both sides hadn't fallen out with each other yet, so the Pine Crane clan still had to put on a show. Unexpectedly, the two new messengers didn't even bother to put on a show. After Patriarch Song He and the others bowed, the two arrogant messengers started to make things difficult in public with gloomy faces. "How dare you, Song He Tao? You've repeatedly disobeyed Commander Styx's orders and disobeyed His Majesty the God Emperor's decree. Your crimes are unforgivable and should be punished. The burly messenger on the left had a gloomy expression. His tone was fierce, and he released a powerful aura. The messenger on the right also took out a noble golden silk. After unfolding it, he read aloud, "Those who see Commander Styx's orders are like seeing Commander Styx himself. Why aren't you kneeling and saluting?" Obviously, this golden silk was an order written by Commander Styx himself. It represented Commander Styx's personal arrival. The messengers present hurriedly knelt and saluted. Patriarch Song He frowned with an ugly expression. The other elders looked at each other and had a bad premonition in their hearts. Chapter 4206. The second batch of messengers clearly came with ill intentions. This thought flashed through the minds of Chief Song He and the other elders at the same time. In fact, this was also within their expectations. In the previous 5 days, the Pine Crane clan was stubborn and didn't surrender, no matter how the first batch of messengers threatened them. Those 2 messengers must have reported the corresponding situation to Commander Mingi. Because of this, Commander Mingi sent out the second batch of messengers to denounce them. As expected, the messenger holding the golden silk saw that Chief Song He and the rest were still hesitating and didn't kneel. He shouted angrily again, "Song He Tao, you didn't kneel when you saw Commander's decree. Is the Pine Crane clan rebelling?" With such a heavy accusation, Chief Song He didn't dare to accept it no matter what. He hurriedly led the way and knelt down. The other elders could only endure the humiliation and kneel behind Chief Song He. When the messenger saw them bowing their heads and listening to the decree, the corner of his mouth curled up into a sneer. Only then did he hold up the golden silk and read aloud, "The Pine Crane clan, an ancient clan with a foundation of 40,000 years and a long history. Since we're based on Reincarnation Island, we should take it as our responsibility to defend against the invasion of foreign enemies. Only then can we live up to the nurturing of Reincarnation Island. Now that Reincarnation Island is about to be invaded by foreign enemies, the reaction and decision of the Pine Crane clan has greatly disappointed me and pained me. Far away, the Pine Crane clan has failed the nurturing of Reincarnation Island, the protection and respect of billions of people. Recently, the Pine Crane clan has failed to live up to His Majesty the God Emperor's trust and high regard. They are truly disloyal and shameless. Therefore, I represent the 800 billion people of Reincarnation Island to condemn the Pine Crane clan. I represent His Majesty the God Emperor and Udu City to punish the Pine Crane clan as a warning to others. From now on, all the properties and territories of the Pine Crane clan will be confiscated. Only ancient Pine Grotto Heaven will be left as mercy. Of the 9,607 people of the Pine Crane clan, other than the 300 guards left behind to guard ancient Pine Grotto Heaven, the rest will be escorted to Udu for trial. This punishment will be carried out by the 4 great reincarnation divine generals leading 8,000 elite soldiers. We hope the Pine Crane clan will recognize the situation, correct their mistakes, and cooperate actively. Anyone who resists or escapes will be killed without mercy. The content in the golden silk was rather long, but the key points were also very prominent. When the messenger finished reading Commander Styx's order, the air seemed to be filled with a thick murderous aura. The messenger slowly rolled up the golden silk and handed it to Patriarch Song He. He sneered and said, "Song Hutao, you'd better take a look at the Commander-in-Chief's handwritten decree with your own eyes." "Ha ha! Who told you to refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? This is the result of angering the Grand Commander. In a few hours, the 4 godly generals and the 8,000-strong army would arrive. Let your clansmen pack their bags and get ready to set off." The messenger purposely dragged out the word "be on your way," and his tone was full of ridicule. The few elders of the Pine Crane race shuddered, their eyes filled with fear and anger. Although they had guessed that Commander Nether River might very well use the Pine Crane race to establish his authority in his fury, they still didn't believe him. But they hadn't expected Commander Mingi to be so decisive and give the order so quickly. Furthermore, the punishment was so ruthless. Not only was the Pine Crane race going to be stripped of all their properties and territories, but they were also going to be escorted to... What did this mean? The entire Pine Crane race would be imprisoned in Yudu. If they didn't surrender and pledge their loyalty to Commander Mingi, they would either become prisoners or be killed as an example to others. Commander Mingi still pretended to leave ancient Pine Grotto Heaven to the Pine Crane race and allowed them to station 300 guards there. But everyone knew that this was completely useless. If the Pine Crane race's clansmen were all executed, ancient Pine Grotto Heaven would naturally become ownerless and would be taken back by Commander Mingi. If the Pine Crane race submitted to Commander Mingi, they would also be sent to the battlefield as cannon fodder when fighting against the Kenshin in the future. It was estimated that more than 80% of the Pine Crane race's clansmen who were forced to participate in the war would die. In short, no matter if the Pine Crane race surrendered or not, they wouldn't have a good ending. The air in the plaza seemed to have frozen, and there was dead silence. Patriarch Song he held the golden silk with both hands, but he didn't open it. His expression was very ugly, and the joints in his hands were bulging. It was obvious that his heart was overflowing with anger. But he lowered his head and didn't make a sound, nor did he get angry. At this moment, there were two choices in front of him. He could either accept Commander Mingi's edict and inform his clansmen to prepare. After a few hours, he would be obediently escorted to Yudu to be judged. Or he could resist Commander Mingi's edict and kill the messengers in the plaza. If he chose the former, the Pine Crane race would be finished, and their fate would be controlled by Commander Mingi. Even if Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison were lucky enough to block the invasion of the Kenshin in the future, the Pine Crane race would probably be wiped out. Thinking about this, Patriarch Song he eliminated the first option. As for the second, if the Pine Crane race wanted to resist the edict and kill the messengers, they would immediately be attacked by the 4 reincarnation divine generals and the 8,000-strong army. In just a few hours, it would be difficult for the Pine Crane race to strengthen their defenses and make any changes. The only way was to close the entrance of the Grotto Heaven and defend it to the death, fighting against Commander Mingi to the end. But in this way, even if they paid a heavy price, they could still block the 4 reincarnation divine generals and the 8,000-strong army. Then, Commander Mingi would send out more troops to attack ancient Pine Grotto Heaven and kill the Pine Crane race disciples. No one could save the Pine Crane race. Unless a miracle happened, Kenshin miraculously descended from the sky at a critical moment to save them. This thought flashed through Patriarch Song He's mind. Even he felt that it was absurd. Where was Kenshin now? It was uncertain when he would come to Reincarnation Island. Moreover, the Pine Crane race had no relationship with Kenshin, so there was no way to contact them. How would Kenshin know about the Pine Crane race's situation? Why would he risk his life to save the Pine Crane race? Patriarch Song he felt a little hopeless at this thought. This choice seemed to be a dead end. No matter how he looked at it, the Pine Crane race was forced into a dead end. At this moment, the Pine Crane race elders were also at a loss. They looked at their patriarch and waited for him to make a decision. If their patriarch decided to surrender, they could only endure the humiliation. If their patriarch decided to resist, they would not hesitate to kill him. The messengers also sensed that the atmosphere was a little strange. They seemed to have guessed Patriarch Song He's thoughts. The 40 golden-armored guards drew their swords and sabers. They were on high alert. The 4 messengers stared at Patriarch Song He sharply. They even warned and threatened him. Song Hutao, don't keep making mistakes and bring harm to the entire Pine Crane race. The 4 reincarnation divine generals and the 8,000-strong army will be here soon. Don't take any chances. Chapter 4207. In fact, the messengers were also a little panicked. While they were talking, the 4 reincarnation divine generals and the army of 8,000 would soon arrive. In fact, the army would take at least 12 hours to arrive. If Patriarch Song He really decided to resist, he would have enough time to kill them dozens of times. Before this, the messenger group had been arrogant and domineering. That was because they represented Commander Mingi. They were confident that the Song He tribe would not dare to offend them because of their noble status. But it was different now. Commander Mingi's edict was too ruthless. He wanted to exterminate the Song He tribe. If it were anyone else, they would have been enraged and retaliated. Judging from Patriarch Song He's expression and reaction, he most likely wanted to resist. If Patriarch Song He took action, the messenger group would be the first to be killed. At this thought, the 4 messengers were even more panicked. They regretted being so arrogant before. But now that things had developed to this point, they could not change their attitude and suddenly admit defeat. They could only pray that Song He Tao would calm down and not act on impulse or go crazy. Otherwise, their glorious and awe-inspiring messenger group would become cannon fodder. Under everyone's gaze, Patriarch Song He slowly raised his head and straightened his thin body. Under the withered and yellow bamboo hat, his wrinkled and weathered face was full of unyielding and anger. He narrowed his eyes, which flickered with a frightening cold light. He stared at the messengers and spoke in a low voice. Every person and every race has the right to survive at all costs. Our Song He tribe has survived for tens of thousands of years and has survived to this day not by sucking up to those in power. Commander Mingi has no right to judge our tribe on behalf of the billions of people on Reincarnation Island. He can only represent the god of the underworld and oppress us ancient clans with his domineering power. As he spoke, Patriarch Song He stood up and straightened his back. The elders of the Song He tribe also stood up and stared at the messengers angrily. They had already guessed what their patriarch was going to say. While they were worried, they also felt hot-blooded and proud. After all, they were descendants of ancient clans. Nobility and pride flowed in their bones. They were willing to give up their lives for their pride and dignity. This was very difficult for ordinary people to do. But to the disciples of the ancient clans, in the face of life and death, they could carry it out. The atmosphere in the square changed. It was no longer deathly still. Instead, it was filled with biting cold winds and murderous intent. The messengers began to panic. They were intimidated by Patriarch Song He's aura, and they couldn't help but retreat. Song Hutao, what do you want? Song Hutao, have you gone senile? If you dare to go against the Grand Commander's orders, you'll be killing everyone in the Pine Crane tribe. Elders, what are you still standing there for? Hurry up and persuade your patriarch. He wants to kill all of you. Song Hutao. This is Reincarnation Island, His Majesty the God Emperor's territory. We are all His Majesty the God Emperor's people. It is the duty of you and the Pine Crane race to obey His Majesty the God Emperor's decree. Don't make a mistake. However, not only did the elders of the Pine Crane clan not dissuade their patriarch, they even secretly ordered the guards near the Divine Palace to gather. Since they had decided to fight back, they had to surround the group of messengers. No one could be left alive. Patriarch Song He also turned a deaf ear to the messenger's words. He looked up at the night sky with a solemn expression and sighed in a sorrowful and heavy tone. In the Great Tribulation era, my Pine Crane race doesn't want to have a meteoric rise. We only want to avoid disaster and protect ourselves, but we can't do that. Commander Mingi has gone too far. My race has endured for 1,000 years, but in the end, he doesn't even give us a way out. There's no way out, so I can only fight with all my might. Ancestors of the Pine Crane race, please forgive this unfilial descendant. At this moment of life and death, I have no choice but to go crazy for once. Anyway, no matter what I choose, I'll die. Since that's the case, I'd rather die with dignity than disgrace the face and integrity of my ancestors. Patriarch Song He's voice wasn't loud, but it had a kind of soul-stirring power that reverberated in the square. If it were someone else who said this, it would be somewhat hypocritical. However, when it came from his mouth, it didn't feel hypocritical. It even felt a bit tragic and hot-blooded. At this moment, the elders were also affected by his momentum and threw away the consequences and worries. Their blood was boiling, and their fighting spirit was burning. There was only one thought in their minds. Even if they would die in the end, they had to fight to their heart's content before they died. Song He Tao, you're crazy. You're really crazy. The messenger who held the golden silk and read the decree suddenly panicked and shouted anxiously. The other 3 messengers saw that the situation was not right, so they hurriedly took him and the guards and flew away. Even if it was a bit embarrassing, and it would weaken Commander Mingy's prestige, they couldn't care less. They had to escape from ancient Pine Grotto Heaven and save their lives first. After a few hours, when Divine General Samsara and the army arrived, they would naturally take revenge for them. The 4 messengers secretly swore that when the time came, they would definitely torture Patriarch Song He and the elders ruthlessly to dispel the hatred in their hearts. However, they could only think about it. Take them down, don't leave a single one alive. Patriarch Song He suddenly raised his hand and gave the order. His tone was exceptionally decisive and domineering. The 6 elders who had been ready for a long time took out their divine weapons without hesitation and rushed toward the 4 messengers with murderous intent. At the same time, more than 300 divine lord guards rushed out of the night sky around the square and formed a circle in an instant, intercepting the group of messengers. What followed was a bloody battle where the number of people was not equal. 6 Divine King Realm Elders led more than 300 Divine Monarch Realm Guards to besiege the 4 messengers and 40 guard. From the very beginning, this battle was a one-sided suppression. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. One side wanted to silence the messengers as soon as possible, while the other side wanted to break out of the encirclement. Both sides unleashed their ultimate skills with all their might, releasing thousands of dazzling divine lights that interweaved in the night sky to form a dazzling scene. All kinds of divine skills and secret skills collided, creating a loud rumbling sound that reverberated between heaven and earth. The square with a radius of 10,000 feet was completely covered by the 5-colored divine light. Patriarch Song He stood in the night sky and stared at the battlefield expressionlessly. He did not attack. He only silently opened the defensive array of the square to prevent the shock waves of the battle from spreading out and destroying the surrounding palaces. In just 15 minutes, the battle was about to end. The messengers were slaughtered. Only 2 messengers of the 7th Divine King Realm were still alive, but they were also severely injured. Before they died, one of the messengers used all his strength to find an opportunity to send out a message jade slip. He wanted to spread the news of the Song He tribe's rebellion. Whoosh! The jade slip flew into the night sky and was about to disappear. The expressions of Patriarch Song He and the other elders changed, and they all looked anxious. Chapter 4208. Since the Pine Crane clan had decided to silence them, they had to kill all the messengers, and the news could not be leaked. And now, before the messenger died, he actually sent out a transmission jade slip. After a while, the 4 reincarnation divine generals and Commander Mingy would receive the news and know that the Pine Crane clan had rebelled. In that case, the Pine Crane clan would not even have time to prepare. They would be besieged and slaughtered immediately. No matter what, the communication jade slip could not be sent out. However, the jade slip had already risen into the sky and was about to disappear into the night. Even a powerhouse like clan leader Pine Crane could not stop it in time. The nightmare and doomsday of the Pine Crane clan were about to arrive with the disappearance of the communication jade slip. The 2 messengers, who were on the verge of death, also showed a look of relief. At this critical moment, a dazzling white light suddenly shone in the night sky, and an unexpected figure appeared. It was a handsome young man in a white robe. He exuded the aura of a powerhouse who looked down on the world. No one knew where he came from or where he had been hiding. However, when he appeared, he was in the sky, less than 10,000 feet away from the rapidly disappearing communication jade slip. He waved his right hand and shot out a beam of golden light, which condensed into a huge palm and accurately grabbed the communication jade slip. As the golden palm retracted, he grabbed the communication jade slip and turned to look at clan leader Pine Crane and the two messengers in the square. Then, he crushed the jade slip with a calm expression. He opened his fingers and let the jade slip powder scatter into the night sky. At this moment, the square was silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on the white-robed young man. Their hearts were filled with shock and disbelief, but they forgot to exclaim and shout. When everyone saw the white-robed young man's appearance, someone immediately recognized him. Kenshin. It's Kenshin? The first to exclaim was the Pine Crane clan's Grand Elder. More than 1,100 years ago, he had a brief contact with Kenshin, so he naturally recognized him. The others in the square immediately reacted and exclaimed in disbelief. Oh my God! How can Kenshin be here? Am I seeing things? Or am I hallucinating? Unbelievable! Previously, I was still fantasizing about this possibility, but I didn't expect it to be too dreamy. Patriarch Song He and the other elders were very excited. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Although Ji Tianxing had intercepted the communication jade slip with his bare hands, it was already shocking enough. However, Patriarch Song He and the other elders had neglected this point and had never mentioned it. After all, in their eyes, Kenshin was incomparably powerful. It was not strange for him to be able to create miracles. In comparison, it was Kenshin's sudden appearance in ancient Pine Paradise that made them even more surprised and shocked. As for the two messengers who were on the verge of death, their expressions changed drastically and their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They could not believe that the sword god, who caused people to tremble in fear upon hearing his name, had actually appeared out of thin air and intercepted the communication jade slip they sent out. This was simply too absurd. Wasn't Kenshin still in the boundless heaven continent? When did he come to the Reincarnation Island? Moreover, there was no news of Kenshin entering Reincarnation Island. He had appeared in ancient Pine Grotto out of thin air. This was too strange, wasn't it? This won't do. Even if we die here, we must report this news to the Grand Commander. Kenshin has already begun to move, but the Grand Commander and the Grand Marshal don't know anything. This is too scary. These thoughts flashed through the minds of the two messengers. They took out their communication jade slips in tacit agreement and sent out the news as quickly as possible. If they could spread this extremely important news, even if they died, the Grand Commander would give them posthumous rewards and treat their families well. Unfortunately, Patriarch Song He and the other elders had already suffered once. How could it happen a second time? The two messengers had just taken out their communication jade slip. Before they could input any information, they were beaten up by Patriarch Song He and the other elders until blood spurted out of their 7 orifices and they were sent flying. The communication jade slips in their hands were also shattered and scattered on the ground. The two messengers were beaten until they were dizzy and almost fainted. The elders swarmed forward and unleashed their ultimate techniques to kill the two messengers. After a series of muffled bangs, blood splattered in the explosion of divine light. The two messengers were killed on the spot. Not even their bones were left. The battle was over and the square finally regained its peace. The Song He tribe did not have time to clean up the battlefield. Under the leadership of Patriarch Song He, they bowed in unison and greeted Ji Tianxing. We pay our respects to Lord Kenshin. Not only Patriarch Song He and the other elders, but hundreds of guards also bowed in unison. It was obvious that everyone's voice was trembling. Clearly, they were very excited. Even now, many people still felt like they were in a dream. They could not believe that the white-robed young man in front of them was really Kenshin. Ji Tianxing landed on the square. Looking at the respectful and emotional crowd, he nodded slightly and said, "Everyone, please rise." Only then did everyone straighten their backs and look at him with burning eyes. They had thousands of words to say and questions in their hearts. Ji Tianxing looked at the square that had been turned into ruins and said to Patriarch Song He, "The battle has just ended. Let everyone clean up the battlefield and recuperate." Patriarch Song He understood what he meant and quickly ordered the guards to clean up the battlefield. He and the other elders hurriedly escorted Ji Tianxing to the conference hall. After entering the conference hall, the two sides exchanged greetings before taking their seat. Patriarch Song He represented everyone and asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "It's really unbelievable. At the most critical moment of our tribe, Lord Kenshin came like a divine soldier from heaven and saved us. This is really amazing. May I ask, Lord Kenshin, when did you arrive at the Reincarnation Island and enter the ancient pine cave?" Patriarch Song He probably felt that his question was a little presumptuous, so he added another sentence. "Please don't blame me, Lord Kenshin. Not only me but everyone else also feels that this is very unbelievable. It's like a dream." Ji Tianxing could certainly understand the feelings of Patriarch Song He and the others, so he did not care. He calmly explained, "A few days ago I arrived at the Reincarnation Island. As long as I did not take the initiative to reveal my whereabouts, Commander Mingi and the Blood Prison Marshal's subordinates naturally could not find me. In these few days, I have basically grasped the situation of the Reincarnation Island. Knowing that Commander Mingi might attack the Song He clan, I came to see the situation in person. Coincidentally, the second batch of messengers from Commander Mingi arrived, so I came in effortlessly. Patriarch Song He and the other elders, for the sake of integrity and dignity, you are firm in your ideas and attitudes, and are not afraid of power and oppression. I am very pleased." Chapter 4209. Upon hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Patriarch Pine Crane and the other elders were shocked and secretly rejoiced. Only then did they realize that Ji Tianxing had already infiltrated ancient Pine Grotto Heaven. However, he had been hiding in the dark, observing the negotiations between the Pine Crane clan and the second batch of messengers. It was only when the Pine Crane clan rebelled and wanted to kill all the messengers that he appeared at the crucial moment. It was because the Pine Crane clan refused to submit to Commander Styx that they could see Kenshin's true appearance and sit here and talk amiably. If Patriarch Pine Crane had compromised and surrendered to Commander Styx, then it would have been a different ending. Fortunately, the heavens had eyes. The Pine Crane clan's persistence and uncompromising finally won Kenshin's trust and favor. At this moment, not only was Patriarch Pine Crane excited, but the other elders were also quite excited, as if they saw a golden and bright future. Of course, these were all thoughts in their hearts and could not be said out loud. Patriarch Pine Crane still had to put on a show. He hurriedly said to Ji Tianxing, "Lord Kenshin, before you appeared, we did not know of your existence. What I said at that time was sincere from the bottom of my heart. Although our Pine Crane clan isn't one of the top forces, we still have backbone and bravery. Moreover, we have never compromised with Commander Styx in the past 1,000 years. A few months ago, when we learned that you had raised an army in the boundless heaven continent and successfully overthrew the rule of the Azura God Emperor, we were very excited and looked forward to it. We hoped day and night that you could come to Reincarnation Island sooner and overthrow the dark rule of the god of the underworld, and return freedom to the people. Therefore, we refused Commander Styx's many summons and threats, and we were waiting for your arrival." The other elders hurriedly nodded in agreement and echoed, "That's right. Lord Kenshin, we struggled under the dark rule of the god of the underworld and the oppression of Commander Styx for 1,000 years, but we never saw the light of hope. It wasn't until the news of your return to the God realm spread that we saw the light. If there is anyone in the world who can overthrow the rule of the 5 God Emperors and restore peace to the world, freedom and peace to the people, it is you. The few elders flattered and praised Ji Tianqing, clearly expressing that the Pine Crane clan could not wait to submit to him. This was because the ancient clans and rebel alliance forces on the boundless heaven continent were the best examples. The Nangong clan, who were the first to express their support for the Kenshin, became the biggest beneficiary. Of course, the Sword God and the Nangong clan were old friends. However, the members of the Pine Crane clan believed that as long as they were the first to side with the Kenshin and publicly expressed their support for the Kenshin occupying the Reincarnation Island, they would definitely be trusted and valued by the Kenshin. If the Pine Crane clan showed enough sincerity and loyalty in the future war, the Pine Crane clan would be able to take over the Pine Crane clan. In that case, after the Kenshin occupied the Reincarnation Island, it was very likely that he would trust the Nangong clan and hand the Reincarnation Island over to the Pine Crane clan to manage. Seeing that the atmosphere was sufficiently enthusiastic and that the foundation was basically in place, clan leader Pine Crane took the opportunity to make a request. Lord Kenshin, you should also know that the people of the Reincarnation Island are also waiting day and night for you to come and save them as soon as possible. Whether it is to save the people who are suffering or to help you complete your great task of occupying the Reincarnation Island. The Pine Crane clan is duty-bound and is willing to charge and break through the enemy lines and cheer for you. After saying that, clan leader Pine Crane led a few elders and bowed deeply to Ji Tianqing. Their attitude was extremely sincere. Back when Ji Tianqing was rebelling in the boundless heaven continent, he had to think of all sorts of ways to coerce the ancient clans to submit to him and form the rebel alliance. Just forming the rebel alliance and gathering the first batch of 10 forces had taken him a lot of time and effort. Now, the ancient clans of the Reincarnation Island had seen the signs from the example of the boundless heaven continent. All of them were waiting for him to come sooner so that they could pledge their allegiance to him as soon as they saw him. While this made him feel a little amused, it also made him feel quite relaxed and happy. At least, he did not have to waste his breath and time to persuade and subdue those ancient clans one by one. So far, there were 4 ancient clans on the Reincarnation Island that had submitted to Commander Mingi. Including the Pine Crane clan, there were still 5 ancient clans that were in a wait-and-see state. Ji Tianqing believed that the 4 ancient clans were most likely in the same state of mind as the Pine Crane clan. They were all waiting for his arrival and appearance. Tonight, as long as he accepted the Pine Crane clan's submission and spread the news, the other ancient clans would be delighted. When the other 4 ancient clans saw hope, they would definitely be in high spirits and try to contact him. Clan leader Pine Crane, I am very gratified that your Pine Crane clan has such intentions. At the same time, I am also happy for the hundreds of millions of people on the Reincarnation Island. The integrity that you have shown in the face of Commander Mingi's oppression today will definitely become a story that will be told all over the Reincarnation Island in the future. Ji Tianqing stood up and looked at clan leader Pine Crane and the others with a solemn expression. He said solemnly, "Since the Pine Crane clan's attitude is so sincere, how can I refuse? From tonight onwards, let us take part in a grand undertaking to overthrow the tyrannical hegemony of the god of the underworld and return freedom and peace to the Reincarnation Island." Clan leader Pine Crane and the other elders secretly heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that he had readily agreed. They became more and more excited. Therefore, they bowed again to express their gratitude to Ji Tianqing. In fact, the Pine Crane clan was so eager to submit to Ji Tianqing not only because they wanted to win Ji Tianqing's trust and regard so that they could control the Reincarnation Island in the future. More importantly, in a few hours, the 4 Reincarnation Heavenly Generals would arrive with an army of 8,000. At that time, the Pine Crane clan would be in a very dangerous situation. Even if they could resist the attack of the army, they would have to pay a heavy price. However, if the Sword God accepted their allegiance, it would be a different story. When the 4 Reincarnation Heavenly Generals and the army of 8,000 arrived, Kenshin alone would be able to intimidate everyone and scare off the army of 8,000. Even if the two sides really fought, the Pine Crane clan, with Kenshin in charge, would definitely win. Since clan leader Pine Crane and the others could think of this problem, Ji Tianxing had already thought of it. However, he did not refuse clan leader Pine Crane's request, nor did he stall for time. Instead, he agreed readily. The reason was that the Pine Crane clan was so sincere in submitting to him, so he had to give them a gift in return. Killing the 4 reincarnation heavenly generals and the army of 8,000 was his gift to the Pine Crane clan. At the same time, it was also a warning to Commander Mingi and the Blood Prison Marshal. It was also an announcement to the entire Reincarnation Island that Kenshin had arrived. Most importantly, he did not take the 4 reincarnation heavenly generals and the army of 8,000 seriously. Powerful strength was the source of confidence and confidence. Chapter 42:10. Ji Tianxing accepted the Pine Crane clan's pledge of allegiance and allegiance. However, things were not that simple. He still had to go through the necessary procedures. He took out a jade slip with an oath of surrender written on it and said to Patriarch Pine Crane, "Since you already know what happened in the Boundless Heaven continent, you should also know my rules, right?" Everyone present was smart. Of course, no one would feign ignorance at this time. As soon as they saw the jade slip in Ji Tianxing's hand, Patriarch Pine Crane and the other elders understood what it meant. After all, the news that Kenshin had sworn an oath in the name of the Heavenly Tao on behalf of Tianxing and bound the entire Boundless Heaven continent had already spread. Patriarch Pine Crane and the other elders also knew about this. They also heard that Kenshin's Heavenly Tao oath was extremely terrifying, and it was approved and supervised by the Heavenly Tao. However, they had not had the chance to see the contents of the Heavenly Tao oath with their own eyes so far. As a result, when they saw the jade slip in Ji Tianxing's hand, they felt a little nervous but also inexplicably expectant. Well, they just wanted to see how terrifying an oath approved by the Heavenly Tao was. Thus, Patriarch Pine Crane hurriedly took the jade slip and said with a smile, "Don't worry, Lord Kenshin. We naturally know your rules. Whether it's the various ancient clans or the various territorial lords, as long as they want to be loyal to you, they have to swear an oath to the Heavenly Tao and be approved and supervised by the Heavenly Tao. Our Pine Crane clan is sincerely pledging allegiance to you. Naturally, we have to swear an oath to the Heavenly Tao and set an example for the other clans." Patriarch Pine Crane would seize every opportunity to show off and crazily gain Kenshin's favor. This was completely different from the stubbornness and bigotry he displayed when facing Commander Styx's messenger previously. It was as if he was a completely different person. From this, it could be seen that no one's character was the same. Oftentimes, when facing different targets, the attitude and character he displayed was also different. Here is the Pine Crane clan, passed down from ancient times and rooted in Reincarnation Island. Patriarch Pine Crane did not hesitate. He held the jade slip with both hands and began to read the Heavenly Tao oath inside. As he read, he was a little surprised and thought to himself, "Ever since Kenshin appeared, I haven't seen him make this Heavenly Tao oath? Why does the content of this oath seem to be tailor-made for our Pine Crane clan? Could it be that, before Kenshin came to ancient Pine Grotto, he was already prepared?" When he thought up to this point, Patriarch Song he had a feeling that Kenshin wasn't as upright, dignified, and honorable as he appeared to be. Combined with Kenshin's series of schemes in the Boundless Heaven continent, his elusive tracks, and the various miracles he had created, he was certain that Kenshin was extremely shrewd and extremely resourceful. In front of such a powerful and scheming expert, it was better not to play any tricks. He might not be able to deceive Kenshin and obtain any benefit. He might even lose his life in the process. Thinking of this, Patriarch Song he obediently recited the oath of surrender, not daring to think about anything else. The content of the oath that followed made his expression change slightly, and he felt a lot of pressure. The oaths of the heavenly Tao were more and more detailed and demanding than the previous one. Patriarch Song He's forehead was gradually covered in sweat, and his face became more and more solemn. The elders listened quietly, but they were more and more shocked, worried, and fearful. Previously, they were still curious about the oath that Kenshin had made. Now, they were no longer curious, and they finally understood why the rumors said that oaths of the heavenly Tao were terrifying. At this moment, they only had one feeling. That was, after Patriarch Song He recited this oath, he would be absolutely loyal to Kenshin, and would not do anything that would harm Kenshin's interests or harm Kenshin. Whether it was direct betrayal, disobedience, or resistance, or indirect passivity, neglect, or disobedience, they would all be supervised and punished by the heavenly Tao. Patriarch Song He and the elders suddenly understood. No wonder Kenshin trusted the 20 factions of the Rebel Alliance so much, as well as the nearly 100 territorial lords of the boundless Heaven continent. He had completely handed over the control of the boundless Heaven continent to the Nangong clan without any misgivings. So that was it. They had learned something new. Even if he wasn't in the boundless Heaven continent, even if he went anywhere, he wouldn't have to worry about the boundless Heaven continent. After all, the heavens were always helping him monitor those who had made the heavenly Tao oath. Who would dare to betray them? Just like that, Patriarch Song He finished reciting the 1,000-word oath in a heavy, sorrowful, and helpless mood. His entire body lit up with dazzling divine light, and a wisp of Taoist rhyme circled above his head. Not only were there dazzling flashes of lightning in the sky, but there was also the sound of thunder rumbling. Clearly, the heavenly Tao oath had been established, and he was recognized and supervised by the heavens. From this moment onward, Patriarch Song He was one of Kenshin's most loyal subjects. After a while, all kinds of strange phenomena gradually disappeared. Patriarch Song He's forehead was covered in cold sweat, and his face was pale. He lowered his head and didn't say anything, silently holding the jade slip and returning it to Ji Tianxing. However, Ji Tianxing didn't reach out to take it. Instead, he said calmly, "Apart from the Patriarch, there's also the Deputy Patriarch." Patriarch Song He and the elders were stunned for a moment. When they came to their senses, they smiled bitterly and helplessly. They didn't expect Kenshin to be so cautious. It wasn't enough for the Patriarch to swear the heavenly Tao oath, but the Deputy Patriarch had to recite the oath as well. However, they were all smart people. They knew that Kenshin was doing this to ensure that nothing would happen to the Pine Crane tribe. Otherwise, if the Patriarch only swore the heavenly Tao oath, there could still be problems. For example, if Patriarch Song He was killed or impeached by the Pine Crane tribe, then the Pine Crane tribe could still break free from Kenshin's control. However, if the Deputy Patriarch also swore the heavenly Tao oath, then it would be safer. It couldn't be that both the Patriarch and the Deputy Patriarch would be killed or impeached by the tribe, right? After figuring that out, the Patriarch and the elders could understand Ji Tianxing's actions. Thus, the Patriarch cupped his hands at Ji Tianxing and said, "The Deputy Patriarch has been in closed-door cultivation for 80 years and hasn't come out yet. If there's a need, I'll order someone to knock on his door and wake him up now." Everyone understood that the Deputy Patriarch had been in closed-door cultivation for 80 years. He must be trying to break through a major realm. If they knocked on his door at this time and forcefully woke him up, it was very likely that his 80 years of cultivation would be wasted. Ji Tianxing was also a reasonable person. He waved his hand and said, "In that case, there's no need to wake him up first. We'll make it up after he comes out of closed-door cultivation. Song Hutao, keep this jade slip and supervise the Deputy Patriarch's recitation of the oath after he comes out of closed-door cultivation." Thus, the jade slip was left in Patriarch Song He's hands in the end. Moreover, he also had the task of supervising the Deputy Patriarch's recitation of the heavenly Tao oath. It was more or less awkward. However, this was Ji Tianxing's order. He had just recited the heavenly Tao oath, so there was no way he could disobey. He could only keep the jade slip and respectfully acknowledge the order.